Chapter 71. As a newcomer who had just arrived at the Spirit Stream battlefield 3 months ago, Lu Yi naturally didn't know what was going on. However, with the glow of his battlefield mark, it made things easier for him. At this moment, he and Hu Po were behind the four from Xian's sect, about 300 meters away. As the four from Xian's sect kept retreating, the distance between them was getting closer and closer. The burly man's injuries were increasing, and the situation was becoming more and more unfavorable for the four from Xian's sect. Seeing that the burly man couldn't hold on any longer, the other third-order cultivator beside him shouted, "All of you, die." As he said this, he took out a golden talisman and activated it with his spiritual power. In an instant, a golden disc the size of a washbasin with flowing spiritual patterns appeared in front of him. This was the golden will talisman that Lu Yi had used to deal with the wolf pack when he first entered the Spirit Stream battlefield. This spirit talisman wasn't as powerful as the fire snake talisman, but it was more durable. At that time, Lu Yi had used this spirit talisman to repel the wolf pack that had surrounded him. As the golden light shone brightly, a golden half-moon flew out from the disc and whistled through the air. For low-level cultivators, a spirit talisman was worth a lot, but as long as one had enough money, everyone would keep one or two as a life-saving trump card. When this person took out the golden will talisman, the fourth-order cultivator from Jiu Xing's sect immediately took a step back. Although his cultivation was higher than the others, he didn't dare to take the attack of the golden will talisman head-on. That would be courting death. He immediately took out a palm-sized round shield from the storage bag at his waist and used it to block in front of him. At the same time, his two companions raised their hands and pressed on the shield. The three of them poured their spirit energy into the shield at the same time, and the palm-sized shield instantly expanded to the size of a table, shielding the three of them behind it. The crescent-shaped golden slash slammed into the shield, producing a clanging sound. The force of the collision pushed the three people from the Jiuxing sect back, and slash marks of varying depths appeared on the shield. However, the slash of the golden will talisman was clearly unable to break through the shield's defense. This shield was a defensive spirit artifact. The four from Xian's sect gradually fell into despair, the golden disc formed by the golden will talisman slowly dissipated and the 9th star sect 4th order cultivator put away his shield with a murderous look on his face. "You won't be able to die even if you want to." Although his defensive spiritual artifact had blocked the opponent's attack, it was severely damaged. He didn't know how many spirit stones he would have to spend to repair it. This made his heart ache so much that it was about to bleed. He raised the weapon in his hand and was about to charge forward when he looked behind the four Jiuxing sect members with a shocked expression. At the same time, the four people from the Jiuxing sect also sensed something strange. Someone was rapidly approaching them from behind. Before they could turn around to look, a shadow had already passed over their heads. In the next moment, a large snow-white tiger appeared in his field of vision, and on the back of the large tiger was a young man in black clothes. "White tiger, young man." In the blink of an eye, the 7 cultivators present understood who had come. Lu Yi placed his hand on the hilt of his saber and leapt off the tiger's back. Staring at the 4th order cultivator, he unsheathed his long saber and slashed it down towards the opponent's neck. The 4th order cultivator's reaction wasn't slow. The moment Lu Yi appeared, he saw through Lu Ye's cultivation. 3rd order spirit stream realm, just as senior brother Chao had predicted. His cultivation was higher than Lu Ye's by a minor realm, so he wasn't afraid of this saber. He held his weapon horizontally to his side and blocked the aggressive saber. However, because Lu Yi had taken the initiative and carried the momentum of the attack, the saber pressed down on his body. Before he could dissipate the force, Lu Ye's body was in mid-air and he had already thrust his saber forward. This saber was extremely tricky and the 4th order cultivator couldn't guard against it. He was also a ruthless person, so he immediately pushed his spirit chi to protect the spot where the saber was about to hit. At the same time, he slashed his weapon towards Lu Ye's neck. Although there was only a minor realm difference between the third order and fourth order cultivators, there was a huge gap in strength because the number of spirit apertures opened in the fourth order cultivator increased by a lot. Therefore, the fourth order cultivator felt that Lu Ye's saber would at most cause him some minor injuries. His spirit chi wasn't just for show, but if Lu Ye was hit, his head would be chopped off. Thinking of the reward of 1,000 spirit stones, the fourth order cultivator's heart burned. With so many spirit stones, he could definitely cultivate to the 6th order or even the 7th order. With a poochie sound, the long saber pierced through his chest. The intense pain shattered the 4th order cultivator's fantasy. What shocked him even more was that his attack didn't hurt Lu Ye at all. The moment his weapon slashed at Lu Ye's neck, something faintly flashed and blocked his attack. Lu Ye flipped over his body and slashed at the back of his neck again. The sharp blade cut through the 4th order cultivator's neck like cutting through tofu. His spirit chi protection became nothing more than a decoration as his head flew into the air and blood spurted from his neck. Lu Ye tumbled to the ground, blood spurting from his waist and abdomen. Another third order cultivator had stabbed him when he wasn't paying attention, but the injury wasn't serious. At most, it could be considered a flesh wound. At that time, Lu Ye had to activate his spirit chi to block the 4th order cultivator's fatal blow, so he couldn't guard against the other attacks and could only rely on his spirit chi to resist. Fortunately, his spirit chi was pure enough to protect his body. The sudden turn of events left the 4 people of the Celestial Sect of Wonders dumbfounded. They thought they were dead for sure, but who knew that the young man riding the white tiger would appear behind them and kill their 4th order cultivator in a single blow. While they were surprised, Lu Ye didn't stop. The moment he landed, the dust under his feet flew up as he charged towards the third order cultivator who had stabbed him. The other party was obviously shocked by the death of his senior brother. Facing Lu Ye's saber head-on, he instinctively raised his sword to block. However, the long sword actually broke. Not every low-level cultivator had a spirit artifact. Only a spirit artifact could block the sharpness of a long saber. Ordinary artifacts couldn't block it at all. The sharp blade fell from the man's nose, cutting open his cheeks and drawing a foot-long wound on his chest and abdomen. Blood and internal organs flowed out together. Only then did the man let out a blood-curdling scream. Lu Ye raised his blade and chopped him down to the ground. The second one. The last remaining third-order cultivator was currently engaged in a fierce battle with Hu Pe. Just now, when Lu Ye was riding Hu Pe, he had targeted the fourth-order cultivator, while Hu Pe had pounced on the other third-order cultivator. Hu Pe wasn't the opponent's opponent and was constantly being cut down by the third-order cultivator. However, when Lu Ye joined in, the situation changed. They were both third-order spirit stream realm cultivators, but Lu Ye's combat power was much higher than his opponent's. Coupled with Big Tiger's cooperation, it didn't take long for him to kill his opponent on the spot. Hu Pe wasn't satisfied and even bit off his opponent's neck. Warm blood sprayed all over his face, making him look even more ferocious and terrifying. The fierce battle came to an end, and the 3 from the 9 Stars sect were killed. The entire battle only lasted for 10 breaths of time. It was so fast that the 4 from the Profound sect didn't even have time to react. Chapter 72. By the time the 4 from Xian sect came back to their senses, Lu Ye had already collected his spoils and mounted the tiger's back, leaving behind a trail of dust. Just now, one of the girls in the group of 4 stuttered. Even her companions didn't understand what she was trying to say. What they had seen just now was too much of an impact on them. Lu Ye was a third-order spirit stream realm cultivator, and there were 2 third-order spirit stream realm cultivators in their group. However, no one could have imagined that a third-order spirit stream realm cultivator could be so aggressive. In just 10 breaths of time, he had killed 3 opponents that they couldn't contend with, and one of them was even a 4th-order spirit stream realm cultivator. This could be considered killing enemies above one's realm. Generally, only disciples from big sects could do this. They were certain that if the youth riding the tiger had attacked them, they would have died faster than the three from Nine Stars sect. Just as they were in a daze, the big tiger that was far away suddenly changed direction and rushed towards them. The face of the Third Order burly man changed. He quickly shielded his three junior brothers and junior sisters behind him and looked ahead vigilantly. After a short while, Hoopa stopped in front of the four. Lu Yi sat on the tiger's back and looked down at them from a distance of less than 5 meters. The strong sense of oppression made the female cultivator's chest heave up and down, making it difficult for her to breathe. "Do you have any spirit pills?" the youth on the tiger's back suddenly asked. "Ah, yes." The burly man quickly responded. "Do you want them?" Lu Yi nodded. "I need spirit pills." The burly man quickly untied the storage bag at his waist and opened the seal. After thinking for a while, he whispered to his three junior brothers and junior sisters, "Give me your spirit pills." The three didn't dare to refute. They took out their spirit pills from their storage bags and handed them to the burly man in a hurry. The burly man took out his own things and transferred them to someone else's storage bag. After a short while, he threw the storage bag containing the spirit pills to Lu Yi, who caught it. "Many thanks," Lu Yi said and threw out the spoils he had collected before. Hoopa turned around and left again. It wasn't until Lu Ye's figure disappeared that the four people from the Celestial Sect of Wonders breathed a sigh of relief. Just a moment ago, when Lu Yi came back to ask for the spirit pills, they thought that they were going to be robbed. But even so, they could only pinch their noses and accept it. Not to mention that they were no match for Lu Yi. In any case, Lu Yi had saved their lives. Compared to the spirit pills, his life was naturally more important. When the burly man threw the spirit pills to Lu Yi, he had already thought of an excuse to thank him with the spirit pills. Who would have thought that Lu Yi didn't take it for nothing and threw the spoils back to them? Looking at the 3 storage pouches on the ground, 2 low-grade spiritual weapons, and a broken shield, the 4 people from the Celestial Sect of Wonders were speechless. After a brief calculation, the 4 of them realized that not only did they not suffer any losses, they even made a small profit. They didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Bending down to pick up the items on the ground, the burly man pondered for a moment and said decisively, "Return to the encampment." Basically, all of them were injured. Most importantly, they had no more spirit pills on them, so it would be difficult for them to continue the battle. Looking at the current situation, it was undoubtedly the wisest choice to return to the encampment to recuperate. Moreover, they didn't have the ability to open the storage pouches of the 9 Stars sect cultivators. They could only return to the encampment, hand them over, and ask the elders of their sect for help. On the other side, Lu Yi rode Hoopa and found a tunnel to check out the spoils. Looking for the Celestial Sect of Wonders to exchange for spirit pills was a sudden inspiration. The main reason was that he had too many storage pouches on him. Before entering the heaven-splitting gorge, he already had several storage pouches on him. After killing the 9 Stars sect's young master and his group of people, he gained another 4 storage pouches. If he took more, he wouldn't have anywhere to put them. If he kept them all in his arms, it would affect the battle. Moreover, these storage pouches were locked with restrictions and he couldn't open them. Rather than keep them by his side, he might as well use them to exchange for some spirit pills with the Celestial Sect of Wonders. The 4 Celestial Sect of Wonders didn't give him many spirit pills. Their cultivations weren't high and they weren't rich, so the spirit pills they obtained were quickly consumed. The 4 of them gave Lu Yi 16 spirit pills, 5 of which were healing pills. When Lu Yi said he wanted spirit pills, he didn't say what kind of spirit pill he wanted, so they took out the spirit accumulation pills and the healing pills. The harvest was okay. Lu Yi felt that his impromptu idea was quite good. This way, he might be able to obtain a large number of cultivation resources in the heaven-splitting gorge. The number of merit points in his battlefield imprint had also changed, from 34 to 56, an increase of 22 merit points. The increase of these numbers was simply a mystery to him. Last time, when he killed the 4 9-stars sect young masters, he gained 26 merit points. This time, it increased by 22, but he didn't know what the increase was. He made up his mind that the next time he killed someone, he would pay attention to the changes in the numbers. Perhaps he would be able to deduce some patterns. In this battle, Yang Kai wasn't seriously injured. He had only been stabbed in the abdomen by a third-order Origin Realm cultivator. After bandaging his wounds and repairing them, Yang Kai set out again. With enough spirit chi in his body, he could continue fighting. From time to time, traces of the battle could be seen in the gorge. Many places still had dried blood and broken corpses, showing just how fierce the battle between Celestial Sect and 9 Stars Sect had been. Not long after, EE, who had been investigating the situation ahead, reported that a team of 2 people was heading towards them. Lu Yi immediately told Hu Pe to hide while he walked towards the 2 newcomers. A moment later, Lu Yi bumped into the 2-man team head-on, both of them vigilantly sizing each other up. Lu Ye's eyes flashed brightly as he judged the cultivation of the other party. 2 third-order spirit stream realm cultivators, such a combination wasn't too weak, and judging from the injuries on their bodies, it was obvious they had experienced a fierce battle. Perhaps there were more than 2 of them. What puzzled Lu Yi was that the battle marks on the back of these 2 people's hands didn't give off any light, so he couldn't tell which side they belonged to and didn't know where to start. What surprised him was that the other party relaxed after sizing up Lu Yi for a moment. One of them even greeted him with a smile. As he walked, he said, "Fellow Taoist, you're quite bold. You dare to move around here alone?" Lu Yi thought for a moment and realized that the other party had mistaken him for one of their own. Loosening his grip on the hilt of his saber, he said indifferently, "They were killed and scattered." The man said, "Then fellow Taoist is really lucky. If fellow Taoist doesn't mind, you can act together with the 2 of us. The 3 of us can take care of each other." "Of course." Lu Yi nodded, as if silence was golden. The man raised his hand and said, "Although I don't think it's necessary, fellow Taoist should still verify your identity with us." As he spoke, a red glow appeared on the back of his hand. Lu Yi raised his brow and confirmed the look in his eyes. They were people he could kill. As the rubble under his feet flew, Lu Yi charged forward with his saber under the astonished gazes of the other 2. Chapter 73. A moment later, Lu Yi picked up the spoils of war and left, leaving behind 2 mutilated corpses. Even a 4th-order spirit stream realm cultivator couldn't withstand 3 slashes from Lu Yi, let alone a 3rd-order spirit stream realm cultivator. The fact that Lu Yi had taken the initiative meant that they were doomed to perish. This time, Lu Yi paid special attention to his progress. Every time he killed someone, his merit points would increase by 3 points, and with 2 kills, his merit points had reached 62. At night, Lu Yi hid himself in a tunnel in the mountainside while Yi and De Hu monitored both ends of the tunnel to prevent others from sneaking in. On this day, he fought 3 battles and gained a good harvest. He didn't take any of the spoils and used them to exchange with the people of the Celestial Sect of Wonders for Spirit Dawn. He got more than 20 Spirit Dawn, most of which were Yun Spirit Dawn. Compared to the spoils of war, Lu Yi felt that he had gained the most from the experience he had gained from fighting others. Although he had fought a few battles since entering the Spirit Stream battlefield, there had always been a long time between those battles, unlike this time, where he had fought in a single day. Such high-intensity battles not only allowed him to quickly examine his shortcomings, but also allowed him to enrich his fighting skills. Cultivating behind closed doors was naturally not as good as fighting with real swords and spears. That was the experience he gained by exchanging blood and injuries. He had suffered some injuries, but they weren't serious. Lu Yi first ate some dried meat to alleviate his hunger, and when he was full, he began swallowing spirit pills to replenish his spirit chi. He frequently used his sharpness and defense spirit tattoos in battle. Although these 2 spirit tattoos could play a role beyond Lu Ye's cultivation level, the drawbacks were obvious, and they consumed a lot of spirit chi. If Lu Yi wanted to maintain his combat strength in the next operation, he would have to maintain sufficient spirit qi. Now that he was a third-order spirit stream realm cultivator, the efficiency of refining pills had increased. Lu Yi didn't know how much it would cost to open another spirit aperture, but according to the previous pattern, the consumption would increase more and more in the future. However, his cultivation efficiency would also increase accordingly, so the time required to open another spirit aperture wouldn't increase too much. The night was silent and the heaven-splitting gorge was silent. No one could hear the sounds of the battle between the Xian sect and the Zhouxing sect. Everyone's cultivation was still low, so they all chose to rest and recuperate at night to replenish their energy. The real battle would only take place during the day. At dawn, Lu Yi led Big Tiger and Yi out of the tunnel and began their hunting journey. Over the next few days, Lu Yi spent his days in constant battle, ranging from 1 or 2 fights to 3 or 4 fights at most. The number of pills in his possession gradually increased, and his merit points also continued to rise. He finally understood how merit points were calculated. Through his observation, the number of merit points represented the number of merit points a cultivator had killed had. This was the basic value. For example, if he killed a second-order spirit stream realm cultivator, he would be able to obtain 2 merit points, so the third layer would be 3 merit points. However, if he were to kill enemies of a higher level, the merit points he would receive would increase by 1. Lu Yi was a third-order cultivator. If he killed a third-order cultivator, he would only receive 3 merit points, but if he killed a fourth-order cultivator, he would receive 8 merit points. Previously, he had killed a fourth-order master when he was just a second-order, a full 2 minor realms above him. That was 12 merit points. After a little calculation, he found that it corresponded to the merit points he received from killing enemies. It seemed that this calculation method was correct. After a few days of fighting, he slowly became familiar with the feeling of fighting to the death. Although his cultivation didn't increase, his combat skills had greatly improved, which increased his efficiency in killing enemies. Over the past few days, Lu Yi also tried to see if he could leave the heaven-splitting gorge, but he found that it was impossible. He didn't know how many people Xian sect and Zhouxing sect had invested in the heaven-splitting gorge, but according to his and Yi Yi's observations, both sides had invested over 1,000 spirit stream realm cultivators. With over 1,000 cultivators scattered in this huge maze, they could encounter enemies at any time. After passing through the maze, the terrain in front of them would suddenly converge and eventually converge into a path through the heaven-splitting gorge. If he wanted to leave, this was the only way out. Zhouxing sect had placed a large number of people at the exit of the gorge, so if he dared to show himself, he would definitely not have a good ending. It would be better for him to hide in the maze and kill enemies. After a few days of fighting, Lu Ye's whereabouts had been exposed. He could clearly feel that Zhouxing sect's search for him was increasing. The most obvious sign was that the number of cultivators he encountered had increased. At first, he encountered small groups of 3 or 4 people, but now, each group had at least 5 or 6 people, and some even had more than a dozen. Lu Yi could grit his teeth and deal with small groups of 3 or 4 people, but he didn't dare to attack small groups of 5 or 6 people. As for small groups of more than a dozen people, he avoided them as far as he could. After the cultivators of Xian sect suffered a few losses, they made corresponding adjustments and increased the number of small groups to fight against Zhouxing sect. In the gorge path maze, a battle was breaking out. The scale of this battle wasn't small, involving nearly 20 cultivators. Both sides had a dozen or so people, including a few fourth-order spirit stream realm cultivators. But judging from the results, neither side had the upper hand and both sides had suffered casualties. In the midst of the battle, a tiger's roar rang out, causing the expressions of both sides to turn cold. Someone shouted excitedly, "The mountain tiger is here." It was the cultivators of Xian sect. Lu Yi, who was lying on the tiger's back and rushing towards the battlefield, frowned when he heard this. He didn't know how he got the title of mountain tiger, but it was too unpleasant to hear. But considering that the two sides still didn't know his name, Lu Yi could only pinch his nose and accept this title. Lu Yi came from the back of Xian Sek's group. Hearing the tiger's roar, Xian Sek's cultivators tacitly opened up a path for him. The tiger's figure leapt into the battlefield and directly tackled a third-order spirit stream realm cultivator to the ground. Lu Yi, who was lying on the tiger's back, had already rushed out. He unsheathed his long saber and slashed it towards a fourth-order spirit stream realm cultivator. This person was fighting a fourth-order spirit stream realm cultivator from Xian sect. This guy had a baby face and looked harmless. Seeing Lu Ye's attack, he couldn't help but shout, "Don't steal my kill." He already had the upper hand. As long as he had enough time, he would be able to take down his opponent. He couldn't be blamed for shouting like this. The main reason was that Mountain Tiger's name had spread among Xian sect's cultivators in recent days. It was said that every time this guy killed someone, he didn't take the spoils and only asked for some spirit pills. Another point was that this guy always appeared and disappeared mysteriously. He liked to steal kills. Sometimes, when he did this, he could save Xian sect's disciples from trouble. Many people were grateful to him for saving their lives. But sometimes, when it was clear that Xian sect's cultivators had the upper hand, he would appear and launch a sneak attack. In the end, he would snatch away the merit points that were already in their hands. Xian sect's cultivators had a love-hate relationship with this person. Chapter 74. When Lu Yi rushed out, the baby-faced cultivator became even more anxious and attacked even more fiercely. His opponent was already not his opponent, and now that Lu Yi had joined forces to attack him, he was in a dangerous situation. Although Tiger Crossing Mountain's name was spread by the Profound Sect, the 9-star sect cultivators were also familiar with it. It could be said that Lu Yi had made a name for himself in the past few days. Fame was a wonderful thing. Facing an ordinary third-order cultivator, any fourth-order cultivator wouldn't feel too much pressure, but if this third-order cultivator had killed several fourth-order cultivators and made a name for himself, the situation would be different. The fourth-order cultivator from 9-star sect was now under a mountain of pressure. Fighting 1 against 2, he was overwhelmed by Lu Yi and the baby-faced cultivator in just 3 breaths of time. Seeing Lu Ye's blade coming, he hurriedly took out a spirit talisman and was about to activate it, but the baby-faced cultivator stabbed his wrist with his sword. The cultivator loosened his grip and the spirit talisman fell to the ground. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Lu Yi raised his blade and chopped the cultivator to the ground. What a sharp blade! The baby-faced cultivator's eyes narrowed. Just as senior brother Wang Yang expected, this Tiger Crossing Mountain really did have an extraordinary spirit artifact. Otherwise, it would be impossible for a third-order cultivator to break through a fourth-order cultivator's spirit chi protection so easily, much less injure him in one strike. Then, the baby-faced cultivator smiled, "Good brother, you're my friend for sure." Lu Yi didn't even look at him as he charged into the battlefield, leaving a heavily injured enemy lying in front of the baby-faced cultivator. Spare me. The fourth-order cultivator was stained with blood as he looked at the baby-faced cultivator in horror. The baby-faced cultivator's smile disappeared as he said indifferently, "You're already a fourth-order cultivator, don't be so naive." The long sword in his hand pierced the enemy's chest as he suddenly straightened his body. A red light overflowed from the back of the dead fourth-order cultivator's hand and floated into the baby-faced cultivator's hand. The baby-faced cultivator smiled again and charged towards Lu Yi while shouting, "Good brother, I'll help you." After the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, the battle ended. It was not that they did not want to escape, but that they did not have the chance to do so. In a battle like this, there was basically no chance of survival once defeated. Running away with your back to the enemy would only result in a faster death. The Celestial Sect of Wonders had also suffered some losses. 3 of them had died, and the rest were basically all injured. But overall, it was a great victory. Those who were still alive were not too sad. Instead, they were full of joy. This was the norm on the Spirit Stream battlefield. Countless spirit stream realm cultivators were fighting each other on the battlefield, and it was common for people to die. In this battle, only 2 people died under Lu Ye's blade, but at least 4 or 5 were injured by him. After the great battle, no one in the Xian sect collected the spoils of war. They just quietly looked at Lu Yi. It was not that they didn't want the spoils of war. It was just that Lu Ye's behavior over the past few days had made them form a tacit understanding with each other. All the spoils of war belonged to the Celestial Sect of Wonders. Correspondingly, the cultivators of the Celestial Sect of Wonders gave Lu Yi some spirit pills as compensation. The baby-faced man was the leader of this group. He stepped forward and cupped his fists. "Junior brother, how should I address you?" 15 meters in front of him, Lu Yi was applying some healing pill powder to his wounds. This was the first time he had experienced a battle of this scale. In the previous battles, there hadn't been many people on either side. At most, there were less than 10 cultivators involved. This time, there were 20 people. He found that a battle of this scale was very dangerous for any cultivator. Even if one's cultivation was higher, they could still be injured or die. This was because a person's energy was limited. It was impossible to defend against all attacks. There were several wounds on his body, all of which were left behind by the 9 Stars sect cultivators. Hearing the baby-faced man's question, Lu Yi pondered for a moment. Before entering, the sect master had told him not to reveal his identity as a disciple of the Jade Blood sect. Obviously, he couldn't use the name Lu Yi. Many sects knew that he had been recruited by the Jade Blood sect. He didn't want the name Tiger Coaster, Yi. Lu Yi made a choice. "So it's junior brother Yi." The baby-faced man chuckled and cupped his fists. "This one is the Celestial Sect of Wonders Chu Tian." Lu Yi cupped his hands in greeting, his expression indifferent, and his posture unapproachable. "It's like this." Chu Tian organized his words a little. "A few days ago, senior brother Wang Yang sent a message saying that if there is a chance, he would like to invite junior brother Yi to the Celestial Sect of Wonders as a guest. What does junior brother think?" "Wang Yang." Lu Yi frowned. Chu Tian smiled and said, "It's one of the senior brothers in charge of our sect's encampment." Lu Yi was not surprised that the other party would invite him to the Celestial Sect of Wonders as a guest. These days, he had saved many Celestial Sect of Wonders cultivators. Moreover, his method of exchanging spirit pills with them had allowed many Celestial Sect of Wonders cultivators to make a fortune. Inviting him to be a guest was clearly a show of goodwill. However, his identity could not be exposed, so he did not dare to have too close contact with unfamiliar sects. Not to mention, he was just passing by and would not have much interaction with the Celestial Sect of Wonders. No need. With a plan in mind, Lu Yi shook his head and refused. Chu Tian was not annoyed at all, as if he had expected such a response from Lu Yi. He still smiled and said, "If that's the case, then forget it." Saying so, he gave a look to the person behind him and that person immediately took action. He took out a storage bag and walked up to his fellow disciples one by one to collect the spirit pills. While waiting, Chu Tian said again, "If junior brother Yi finds it convenient, can you leave a contact method? This way, if there is any situation, you can also communicate with my Celestial Sect of Wonders." Lu Yi did not know how to leave a contact method, but he more or less had a guess. In the past few days, when killing enemies, many 9 Stars sect cultivators would reach out and touch the back of their hands before they died. The battlefield imprint would emit light, just like what Zhang Wu did after he was seriously injured. The battlefield imprint should not only record some information, but also be used for communication. Thinking of this, Lu Yi nodded, "Okay." Chu Tian touched the back of his hand and a blue light like a burning flame lingered on his fingertip. He flicked his finger and the blue light flew towards Lu Yi like a blue butterfly and landed on the back of his hand. Lu Ye's heart skipped a beat. The blue light imprinted into the imprint and disappeared. At the same time, he vaguely felt that there was something more to his battlefield imprint, but it was not convenient to check at this time, so he continued to maintain his cold and arrogant appearance. The Celestial Sect of Wonders cultivators' spirit pills were quickly collected. Under Chu Tian's signal, they were handed over to Lu Yi. Lu Yi did not check and put them away. He called out to Hu Pe and flipped onto the tiger's back. "Junior brother Yi." Chu Tian suddenly called out. Lu Yi sat upright on the tiger's back and turned to look at him. Chu Tian said seriously, "There seems to be a guy from Boundless Island on the 9 Stars sect's side. Junior brother, you must be careful." Lu Yi nodded slightly, and Big Tiger turned around and left in a cloud of dust. Chu Tian looked at his departing figure and stroked his smooth chin. These disciples from large sects are really arrogant. They don't even care about Boundless Island. Chapter 75. A moment later, the Xian sect cultivators found a tunnel to rest under Chu Tian's lead. Chu Tian leaned against the rock wall, waiting for the people from the sect to send over supplies while using the battlefield brand to send messages. In the Xian sect's encampment, a large number of buildings were scattered among the spirit peaks. The spirit qi lingered in the mountains, and the entire encampment was shrouded in a thick fog. It was impossible to see the situation inside from the outside, so it was obvious that there was a large spirit array covering it. In the courtyard of one of the peaks, the handsome Wang Yang wore white clothes and stood beside a fish pond. He casually scattered fish food and watched the koi fish compete in the pond. Behind him, Xiao Zhu stood there quietly. Suddenly, Xiao Zhu activated her battlefield brand and sensed something. Raising her head, she said, "Young master, Chu Tian met Tiger Cobra and invited him over, but he was rejected." Wang Yang did not say anything. After scattering the fish food in his hand, he clapped his hands and walked to a chair to sit down. Picking up a cup of tea, he took a sip and said slowly, "As expected, such a person would not easily enter the encampment of other sects." "Then why did young master invite him?" Xiao Zhu did not understand. Wang Yang chuckled, "Many of our junior brothers and sisters have received a life-saving grace from him, and we have also received benefits from him. We should at least show some gratitude. Whether we invite him or not is our business, but whether he gives us face or not is his business." Xiao Zhu nodded. "What else?" Chu Tian said that Tiger Cobra really did have a good spirit artifact, and then he called himself One Leaf. One Leaf? Wang Yang revealed a pondering look, but shook his head after a while. He had never heard of this name before. From time to time, some new stars would appear in the cultivation world of the 9 states. Before these new stars bloomed, very few people would have heard of their existence, but once they bloomed, they would be the center of attention. Of course, there were also many new stars that were annihilated before they could even bloom. The cultivation world was full of dangers, especially in the chaotic spirit stream battlefield. Every year, countless geniuses died in the spirit stream battlefield. Chu Tian also said that this person seemed to have mastered a defensive spirit rune. In battle, this spirit rune could be activated at will, and could block the attacks of a 4th-order spirit stream realm cultivator. In the battle, Lu Yi frequently activated his spirit rune. The sharp spirit rune was more hidden, because it was added to the long saber. Even if it was activated, others would think that it was a seal on the saber and would not think too much of it. However, the defensive spirit rune was different. Even though the spirit rune would disappear in a flash every time, under Chu Tian's careful observation, it could not be hidden. A defensive spirit inscription that can be activated at will? This time, Wang Yang was truly shocked. A 3rd-order spirit stream realm cultivator. One had to know that spiritual tattoos were extremely complicated and mysterious, and it required a lot of time to study them. He had learned this thing when he was bored before. However, the lines and drawings recorded in the book were extremely complicated and mysterious. Every time he read it, he would feel drowsy and his head would buzz. In the end, he tore the book apart with his hands. Chu Tian said so. The corner of Wang Yang's mouth twitched. Which big sect did this freak come from? Yes, Wang Yang concluded that Lu Yi was definitely a disciple from a big sect. Because his cultivation was not high, he came to the outer circle to gain experience. The reason for this speculation was entirely because of Lu Ye's amazing performance in the past few days. According to the statistics of the Profound Sect, they saw no less than 29 star sect cultivators die at Lu Ye's hands. Among them, there was no lack of fourth-order spirit stream realm cultivators. Being able to kill enemies above one's realm was a sign of a big sect. A small sect could not cultivate such a disciple. Moreover, he also had a handsome pet beast. That pet beast was not something that ordinary people could subdue. Coupled with the information Chu Tian had just sent back, Wang Yang was more and more certain of his guess. Only someone from a big sect could have such a deep heritage and be able to activate spirit runes to fight with a third-order spirit stream realm cultivation. The name Tiger Crossing Mountain came from Wang Yang's mouth. In Wang Yang's opinion, Lu Yi was a tiger crossing the mountain. This style of letting go of their disciples is somewhat similar to the sect in the Heaven continent. They have many top spirit rune masters. Wang Yang said thoughtfully. Xiao Zhu did not know which sect Wang Yang was talking about. She only knew that Tiger Crossing Mountain called Yi Yi must have an extraordinary background. She said, then, young master, should we secretly help him? There's no need for that. Wang Yang waved his hand. He came out to gain experience. Whether he lives or dies is his own business. How can we help him? If we don't handle it well, we will end up offending him. Many big sects had a habit of letting their disciples grow. These talented disciples would leave the shelter of their sect and their cultivation was not high and wander the outside world alone to hone themselves. Although there was a great risk in doing so, once they grew up, their strength would far surpass their peers. Therefore, there was an unwritten rule in the spirit stream battlefield. Even if these disciples were killed, the big sects would not retaliate. This was the price they had to pay to grow. Big sects had no shortage of geniuses, so if a genius died, they would not feel any regret, unless they were relatives of the sect's upper echelons. However, that was a private act of revenge and had nothing to do with the sect. Wang Yang could speculate that Lu Yi was a disciple from a big sect, so Nine Stars sect naturally had the same speculation, but even so, Nine Stars sect had not given up on pursuing Lu Yi. It was not that Nine Stars sect was not afraid of these big sects, but they knew that these big sects would not cause trouble for them because of this. What's more, the cause of this war is this person. My Profound Sect has already shared enough pressure for him. If he knows what's good for him, he should obediently come here and thank me. Wang Yang chuckled. Xiao Zhu rolled her eyes. She was Wang Yang's personal maidservant, so she knew far more than others. This time's declaration of war seemed to be the result of Profound Sect taking advantage of the situation, but in fact, it was premeditated. It was just that Wang Yang had not been able to find the right opportunity until Lu Yi killed Nine Stars Sect's young master. For Wang Yang, Lu Yi was simply a lucky star that fell from the heavens. Wang Yang had to go to the inner circle of the battlefield, where a seventh-order cultivator was nothing but a life-or-death crisis. So, before he left, he had to find a way to deal a heavy blow to Nine Stars Sect. This way, even if something happened to him, the situation here would be stable for a while until someone could replace him. How are the casualties? Wang Yang asked again. 30 people died, but 70% of them were rogue cultivators, Xiao Zhu replied. Wang Yang nodded. This result was satisfactory to him, so he ordered, increase our efforts and end this war as soon as possible. Only by ending this war as soon as possible could his plan begin. Chapter 76. As for the casualties, Zhouxing's sect was also in the midst of calculating. Chao Yi looked at Dong Shuyi with a worried expression. Senior brother, our casualties are quite high. Nearly 60 people have been killed since the start of the war. Dong Shuyi was shocked, how could there be so many? Even if Jiu Xing sect was no match for Profound sect, they shouldn't have suffered so many losses in just a few days. Chao Yi said, it's all because of Tiger Cobra. Every time the two sides fight, he would suddenly appear. Many disciples have died because of him. That bastard. Dong Shuyi was furious and his face turned gloomy. What about the fifth order masters in the sect? They've been targeted by the other side. Chao Yi was helpless. There were only a few fifth order masters that the two sects could send out. Everyone knew each other's details, so it was easy to target each other. Senior brother, do you want me to take action? Dong Shuyi shook his head. No, if you take action, Wang Yang will definitely not sit back and watch. Can you deal with that cheap maid? The cheap maid he was talking about was Xiao Zhu. Chao Yi felt a headache coming on. No, but she can't kill me either. Although that cheap maid's background was low, her strength was quite good. He didn't know what kind of dog shit luck Wang Yang had to have a maidservant by his side grow to such a level. What's the situation with Luo Ji? Dong Shuyi asked. Speaking of Luo Ji, Chao Ye's head hurt even more. That guy doesn't take the declaration of war seriously. I don't know where he went, but he didn't reply to my messages. He's from Boundless Island, so of course he won't take our declaration of war seriously. Dong Shuye's face darkened for a while before he grit his teeth. Doesn't he want the purple robes? Tell him that as long as he brings me Tiger Cobra's head, I'll give him the purple robes. Senior brother. Chao Yi looked at Dong Shuyi in shock. Go. Dong Shuyi shouted. Yes. Chao Yi accepted the order with a sullen face. When he walked out of the hall, he turned his head and glanced at the girl in purple who was squatting in front of a bush, sniffing the flowers. Chu Tian soon received a message. He thought it was a reply from senior brother Wang Yang, but after checking it, he found that it was a message from someone he had never contacted before. The message was very simple, only 2 words. Chu Tian. Chu Tian was confused, but he soon understood who was sending him a message. There was only one person in the records of his battlefield imprint that he had never contacted before. He immediately replied, it's me. What's the matter, Junior Yi? No problem. The other side immediately replied. The corner of Chu Tian's mouth twitched. Nothing happened. He thought that Tiger Crossing Mountain had something important to discuss with him. After thinking for a while, he sent another message, Junior Marshal Brother Iya, if there's anything you need, there's no harm in telling me. If I can help you, I, Chu Tian, will definitely do my best. There was no response. On the other side, Lu Yi was hiding in a tunnel, sensing his own battlefield mark. His expression was inexplicable and his mood was strange. Was this the first friend in his address book? He really didn't understand what was going on in this world. Ever since he had entered the Spirit Stream battlefield, strange things had happened one after another. Fortunately, after his investigation, he found that his real name would not be revealed when he contacted Chu Tian, which made him feel relieved. Ignoring Chu Tian's reply, Lu Yi swallowed a spirit pill to restore himself. The battle this time hadn't consumed much of his strength, so it only took him half a day to completely restore himself. However, he didn't stop there and continued to take spirit pills to break through the barrier of a certain spirit aperture. He was now a third-order spirit stream realm cultivator, but he had already opened 28 apertures. The extra spirit aperture was the one recorded in the gluttonous meal secret art. He had already cultivated the golden cicada carefree secret art to perfection, so he didn't have a higher grade secret art to improve his cultivation, so he decided to cultivate the gluttonous meal secret art. This secret art was bought for 3 spirit stones and contained 15 spirit apertures, most of which overlapped with the golden cicada carefree secret art. Only 2 spirit apertures were not part of the golden cicada carefree secret art system. Since he had nothing to do, Lu Yi had been pondering over the gluttonous meal secret art since a few days ago. Now that he had successfully opened one of his apertures, he only needed to open another to see the true face of this secret art. According to the rogue cultivator who sold him the secret art, this secret art could double one's cultivation efficiency, but Lu Yi was sure that he had been deceived. It was impossible for such a heaven-defying secret art to exist in this world, and even if it did, it wouldn't be sold so casually. In any case, the 2 extra spirit apertures were real. Now that he had opened 2 more spirit apertures, he would be able to open 2 fewer in the future when he cultivated a higher-grade secret art. Lu Yi had come to cultivate this secret art with the mindset that he wouldn't suffer a loss no matter what. His spirit chi surged, attacking the barriers of his spirit apertures again and again. Compared to when he had just started cultivating, attacking the barriers of his spirit apertures was much easier now, because he had sufficient spirit chi in his body. As he attacked, the barriers of his spirit apertures were constantly loosening, and he also felt a sore feeling coming from his spirit apertures. After only an hour, Lu Yi felt the barriers of his spirit apertures shatter. The 29th aperture opened. The following matters were simple. If he wanted to operate a set of cultivation methods, he had to let his spiritual energy flow according to the cultivation method's route. However, because the 15 spiritual cavities of the gluttony meal were largely overlapping with the golden cicada carefree technique, if he wanted to operate the gluttony meal, he had to first interrupt the circulation of the golden cicada carefree technique. The 3rd cycle, however, didn't need to be interrupted, because the 9 spiritual cavities weren't part of the gluttony meal's route. Lu Yi had never done such a thing before, but after trying it out, he found that it was actually a very simple thing. The minor heavenly cycle was originally created by the rapid flow of spiritual energy from the 9 spiritual cavities. As long as the rapid flow of spiritual energy was stabilized, the flowing spiritual energy would once again return to the spiritual cavities. Lu Yi tried to make the spirit energy flow again, and in just a short moment, it returned to its original state. Now that he had a plan in mind, he felt much more at ease. Once again calming the first 2 minor heavenly cycles' spiritual energy flows, he waited until all the spiritual energy returned to the spiritual cavities. Then, he began to follow the gluttony meal's route, letting his spiritual energy flow through the 15 spiritual cavities. 1 cycle, 2 cycles. Gradually, the flow of spiritual energy became faster and faster, until there was no need for Lu Yi to urge it to operate on its own. Lu Yi suddenly had a strange feeling, and that was that his abdomen seemed to have started to squirm violently, his heart stirred, and he promptly took out a spirit pill and swallowed it. The next moment, the squirming in his abdomen became even more obvious, and his whole lower abdomen seemed to have turned into a millstone. The spirit pill he swallowed was ground by this millstone, rapidly releasing its energy and transforming it into spiritual energy. Lu Yi suddenly opened his eyes, and a shocked expression appeared on his face. He suddenly discovered that the guy called Chen He who sold him this cultivation method didn't seem to be lying. This gluttony meal really could double the efficiency of one's cultivation. Chapter 77. The speed at which the pills were dissolved was much faster than before, and as a result, the efficiency at which he refined the pills would naturally increase. That Chen He really wasn't lying, no wonder he dared to make a heavenly oath in front of him. However, Lu Yi quickly figured out why this cultivation method was being sold everywhere. The gluttonous meal could double the efficiency of cultivation. At first glance, it sounded heaven-defying, but in fact, when a cultivator took pills to cultivate, they would accumulate pill toxins. Once the pill toxins accumulated, the spiritual energy in the body would become obscure, and the more pills one refined, the more obvious the situation would become. Therefore, after cultivating for a period of time, cultivators would stop taking pills and think of ways to resolve the pill toxins. In other words, under normal circumstances, there wasn't much difference whether a cultivator's efficiency in refining pills was fast or slow. Being slow even had its own benefits, however, Lu Yi was different. He had the innate tree to burn the pill toxins, and when the pills entered his stomach, they would only turn into spiritual energy, which was purer than ordinary cultivators. Therefore, the gluttonous meal's effect of increasing cultivation efficiency was real for him. And the combination of the innate tree and the gluttonous meal was simply a perfect match. Realizing this, Lu Yi couldn't help but feel excited. As a result, he would undoubtedly save a lot of time on his cultivation in the future. However, this also meant that he was destined to walk further and further on the path of cultivation by taking pills. The pill's pill energy was quickly consumed, and the spiritual energy in Lu Ye's body gradually became abundant. Perhaps because of his cultivation, his stomach began to rumble. Lu Yi immediately took out some food from his storage bag and ate it in big bites. Then, he discovered something interesting. His ability to digest food had also become stronger. The 15 spirit cavities of the gluttonous meal were all distributed near his stomach. When the cultivation method was operated, his entire stomach would squirm violently, like a millstone. Under the powerful grinding force, not only could it quickly refine the pill energy, it could also digest the food. After some investigation, Lu Yi discovered that the reason why the gluttonous meal could be like this was not purely because of digestion, but more because of absorption. Only by absorbing would he be able to truly increase the efficiency of his cultivation. In his perception, Lu Yi found that if he connected the 15 spirit cavities according to a certain pattern, he would obtain a somewhat familiar pattern. He thought for a moment, then raised his hand and urged his spiritual energy to construct a spirit pattern. It was the third spirit rune he had obtained, Spirit Gathering. As soon as the Spirit Gathering rune appeared in his hand, it produced an invisible suction force, and the surrounding spirit chi began to flow toward him. The Spirit Gathering spirit pattern was an extremely complicated and abstruse pattern that was constructed with spirit energy. The pattern that he obtained from the Feast of Gluttony was undoubtedly much simpler, but the two should be from the same source. Was it a coincidence? Or could it be that the cultivator who created the Taotai meal cultivation technique had borrowed the structure of the Spirit Gathering runes? The main function of the Spirit Gathering spirit runes was to gather the spirit chi of heaven and earth. If the pill energy was compared to spirit chi, then the gluttony meal was also gathering. However, the gathered pill energy was transformed into spirit chi for the cultivator to absorb. Thinking of this, a vague idea suddenly popped up in Lu Ye's mind, but when he tried to think clearly, he found that he couldn't figure it out. He fell into deep thought, allowing the gluttonous meal to continue. Under the guidance of an inexplicable force, the surrounding spirit chi of heaven and earth gathered towards Lu Yi, merging into the spirit gathering spirit mark on his hand before dissipating again. However, Lu Yi soon discovered that a portion of the spirit chi of heaven and earth had entered his abdomen. Following the grinding of the gluttony meal, it transformed into his own spirit chi. This made him a little surprised. These days, he had been cultivating using the method of refining spirit pills, supplemented by refining essence into chi. The main reason was that the efficiency of swallowing the spirit chi of heaven and earth was too low. It was very difficult for his body to accept spirit chi. It was as if there was an invisible barrier covering his body, isolating the spirit chi of heaven and earth outside. Even the efficiency of cultivating with the help of spirit stones was not high. Strictly speaking, spirit stones were the condensation of spirit chi. If it was difficult to accept spirit chi, it naturally couldn't accept the power of spirit stones. But now, even though he wasn't cultivating, the gluttony meal actually gathered some spirit chi to grind and refine. This also indirectly verified Lu Ye's guess just now. The person who created the gluttony meal cultivation technique must have borrowed the construction of the spirit gathering spirit runes. Otherwise, the two wouldn't have similar characteristics. Of course, the spirit chi gathered by the gluttony meal wasn't much. The true purpose of this cultivation technique was to refine things into the abdomen. Gathering spirit chi was just an additional effect. Thinking of this, the vague idea in Lu Ye's mind suddenly became clear. The gluttony meal could gather spirit chi, and the spirit gathering spirit runes could also gather spirit chi. The two came from the same source. The effect of the gluttony meal cultivation technique was brought about by the joint operation of the 15 spirit cavities, so the focus was on the spirit cavities. What if he added the spirit gathering spirit runes to the spirit cavities? What would happen? Lu Yi was shocked by this bold idea of his. Although he was only a small cultivator who had cultivated for a few months and didn't know much about the cultivation world, he still knew the importance of the spirit cavities to a cultivator. It could be said that once there was a problem with the spirit cavities, a cultivator's life would be affected. When he obtained the spirit-gathering spirit runes, he investigated the characteristics of this spirit runes. In the end, he concluded that it was trash because his body couldn't accept spirit chi from outside. Even if he activated the spirit-gathering spirit runes, it wouldn't be of much use. However, he seemed to have entered a blind spot in his thinking. The spirit-gathering spirit runes could not only be added to the hands, but also to other places. For example, the spirit cavities. If this idea of his came true, then the spirit-gathering spirit runes wouldn't be trash. It could even become the most useful spirit runes. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that this idea was feasible. Lu Yi stopped circulating the Taotai meal technique and switched to the Golden Cicada Carefree technique. Other cultivators didn't dare to add spirit runes to their spirit cavities. The biggest reason was that the construction of spirit runes was complicated. Even the most experienced spirit rune master had the possibility of failure. Once the construction of the spirit rune failed, the spirit runes would explode, causing some damage to the spirit cavities. However, Lu Yi didn't have this kind of concern. He had already grasped 3 spirit runes. Every time he obtained a spirit rune, a large amount of information regarding that spirit rune would be poured into his mind. His construction of spirit runes had never failed before. Even so, Lu Yi didn't dare to make a move on his source spirit cavities. Instead, he chose another spirit cavities. The source spirit cavities were the most important spirit cavities. Once there was a problem, it would be over. If something happened to the other spirit cavities, perhaps there was still a way to remedy it. Sensing the location of the spirit cavities, Lu Ye's mind moved slightly. He urged his spirit-gathering spirit runes to the spirit-gathering spirit runes. However, in an instant, the spirit-gathering spirit runes were scattered by the spirit chi flowing in his body. No, I need to adjust it. I can't add the spirit runes to the spirit cavities. Otherwise, I won't be able to maintain it. Chapter 78. Lu Yi failed again and again, but he wasn't discouraged. On the contrary, he was in high spirits, because every failure was accumulating experience. The most difficult part of engraving a spirit-gathering rune in a spirit cavity was the circulation of one's own spiritual energy. The circulation of spiritual energy would push the rune away. Therefore, if Lu Yi wanted to engrave a spirit rune in a spirit cavity, he had to avoid the impact of spiritual energy. Otherwise, it would be impossible to succeed. However, this would lead to another problem. If the spirit rune was too far away from the spirit cavity, it wouldn't have much of an effect. For example, if Lu Yi engraved a spirit rune on his hand, the spirit rune would gather spiritual energy. However, his body wouldn't be able to accept external spiritual energy, so he wouldn't be able to convert it into his own spiritual energy. In order to maintain the stability of the spirit rune and make it work, he had to find a point of balance. Fortunately, the cost of engraving a spirit-gathering rune wasn't high. This was something Lu Yi had discovered when he obtained this spirit rune. 4 hours later, he still hadn't succeeded. Lu Yi tried to change the shape of the spirit rune. Under normal circumstances, a spirit rune would be a flat surface. Unless one had deep attainments in this field, it would be impossible to change a spirit rune. Although Lu Yi hadn't studied the knowledge of spirit runes, when he obtained these spirit runes, a large amount of information about them would rush into his mind, allowing him to understand the various mysteries of these spirit runes. Lu Yi had the ability to change the shape of the 3 spirit runes he had grasped so far. He only lacked practical experience. He tried again and again until half a day later, a spirit-gathering rune was formed. This time, it wasn't scattered by the spiritual energy flowing in his body. Success! Lu Yi revealed a joyful expression and silently sensed it. He could feel that under the effect of the spirit rune, the surrounding spiritual energy of heaven and earth would gather and pour into the spirit cavity, turning into his own spiritual energy. At this moment, the spirit gathering rune had been transformed into the shape of a hole and was engraved on the spirit cavity. The tip of the funnel poked into the spirit cavity with the smallest margin. In other words, the spiritual energy gathered from the outside world would directly enter his spirit cavity through this small funnel and be converted by his spiritual energy without passing through his body. In this way, whether Lu Ye's talent was 1 leaf or 64 leaves, it wouldn't affect the effects of the spirit gathering rune. I'm really clever. Lu Yi couldn't help but praise himself in his heart. Although he had successfully engraved the spirit gathering rune on his spirit cavity and started absorbing spiritual energy of heaven and earth, the rune's effect was limited because it was small. This was only one spirit cavity. Lu Yi had now opened 29 spirit cavities. What effect would it have if he engraved the spirit gathering rune? Lu Yi couldn't help but look forward to it. If this idea could be implemented, then his cultivation in the future would not be limited to swallowing spirit pills. He would also be able to absorb the spirit chi of heaven and earth. Not only could he save a lot of spiritual energy of heaven's cultivation resources, but he could also increase his cultivation efficiency. Lu Yi couldn't trying spirit rune. With the success of the first attempt, the second attempt was much simpler. By the time he reached the 10th spirit cavity, Lu Yi could already vaguely feel the effects. By the time he reached the 20th spirit cavity, the effects were even more obvious. By the time Lu Yi had engraved all 29 of his spirit cavities with the spirit gathering rune, it was already night. At this time, he could clearly feel the spiritual energy of heaven and earth continuously pouring into his spirit cavities. Following the flow of his spiritual energy, it was transformed into his own power. The spirit gathering rune could last for a long time because it continuously gathered spiritual energy of heaven and earth to replenish itself. In theory, as long as Lu Yi didn't take the initiative to disperse the runes, they would last forever. Of course, in reality, this was impossible. Lu Ye's current state was stable, so the runes could be maintained. However, if he fought with someone, his spiritual energy would flow violently, and it would be easy to destroy the runes. In the end, this was a business without any cost. Lu Yi only needed to construct the runes and engrave them on his spirit cavities at the right time. After that, he didn't need to do anything else, and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth would be gathered and poured into his body. He could even busy himself with other things. Now, he just needed to see how much benefit these runes could bring him in a certain period of time. In order to explore this point, he calmed his breathing and focused his mind, perceiving the changes in the spiritual energy in his body. 6 hours later, he came to a conclusion. If the runes of the 29 spirit cavities could last for a day and a night, the benefits they brought to him were almost equivalent to taking a spirit accumulation pill. It wasn't much, but it wasn't little either. It had to be known that there were only 29 spirit cavities, while the total number of spirit cavities in a cultivator's body was as many as 360. If one day, Lu Yi could enhance the spirit gathering in all 360 spirit cavities, the benefits would be great. Now that he had a lot of spirit accumulation pills, a supplementary secret art, gluttonous feast, and a spirit accumulation rune, Lu Yi was eager to find a place to retreat and cultivate until he reached the 9th order spirit stream realm. However, what made him feel helpless was that he didn't have a suitable secret art. The golden cicada free art he obtained from manager Yang could only be cultivated until the 3rd order spirit stream realm. He originally planned to wait until the next market square and go to the Heavenly Secret Commerce Union sub-union to see if he could buy a secret art. For this reason, he sold 4 pieces of yuan magnetic ore along the way and saved more than 200 spirit stones. But who would have thought that he would be trapped in the heaven-splitting gorge, unable to leave for the time being? This was a little worrying. After thinking about it, Lu Yi raised his hand and tapped on his battlefield imprint, sending out a message. Chu Tian was meditating to recover when he suddenly received a message. He quickly checked and found that it was Lu Yi looking for him. Having learned his lesson during the day, Chu Tian cautiously replied, "Junior brother Yi, what's the matter? Do you have a mysterious grade secret art? Sell me one." Chu Tian was puzzled. What do you want a mysterious grade secret art for? In the corridor, Lu Yi looked at Chu Tian's reply speechlessly, thinking that this guy was an idiot. He patiently replied, "To cultivate." Chu Tian looked at Lu Ye's reply and couldn't help but scratch his head. A moment later, the message was sent back to the Xian Sect station. Wang Yang looked at Xiao Zhu with a surprised expression. "Is the news correct?" Xiao Zhu nodded. "The news from Chu Tian should be correct." Wang Yang thought seriously for a moment and couldn't help but click his tongue. Sure enough, it's the style of those big sects. The disciples they send out have to completely rely on themselves, not even preparing a secret art for them. It seems that the secret art he cultivated before was only a yellow grade secret art. Now that he has reached the peak of the third order spirit stream realm, he needs to change it. Chu Tian is waiting for the letter. How should we reply? It's just a secret art, something that can be found on the streets. Just give it to him. Tell Chu Tian to ask him what it is. Xiao Zhu nodded, thinking that these disciples from big sects were quite pitiful. Although her own profound sect was only a 9th grade sect, in the early stages of cultivation, her senior brothers and junior sisters helped each other, so there wouldn't be so many hardships. Right, don't give it to him for free. Those big sects don't like this. Sell it to him and ask for less spirit stones, he's also very poor. Understood. Chapter 79. In the corridor, the very, very poor, Lu Yi was counting his wealth. He only had a little more than 200 spirit stones, but he didn't know if it was enough to buy a secret art. If it wasn't enough, he took out the small bell spirit artifact from his storage bag. This was the relic of the 9 Stars sect's young master, so it should be worth a lot of money. If it really didn't work, he could only use this to pay off his debt. He still had the 9 Stars sect's young master's storage bag. There should be a lot of good things inside, but unfortunately, he couldn't open it. But then again, many of the profound sect's disciples had benefited from him in the past few days, so it was reasonable for the profound sect to give him a discount, right? Chu Tian sent another message, asking about his subordinates. Lu Yi told him the truth. There was no need to hide it. Moreover, a secret art that suited him was very important. A moment later, Chu Tian sent another message, telling him that he would give him a definite answer tomorrow at the earliest, or the day after at the latest, because it would take some time to send the secret art over from the station. Lu Yi said that there was no problem. After ending the message with Chu Tian, Lu Yi got up and prepared to practice his saber. Although he had been fighting non-stop these past few days, he had never stopped practicing his saber because he could feel that this most basic training was very helpful to him, and this was something that required perseverance. However, before Lu Yi could unsheath his saber, a tiger's roar suddenly rang out. Lu Yi abruptly turned around and saw Hu Po's figure scurrying towards him. Yi, who was monitoring the situation at the other end of the corridor, also ran over. After exchanging a glance with Lu Yi, she hid behind the rock wall. Hu Po ran in front of Lu Yi, turned around, and lowered his body. There was a wound on his body that wasn't too serious, and he roared towards the front. A figure slowly appeared from the other side. Lu Yi circulated his spirit energy to investigate the other party's aura. He made up his mind. If it was a 5th order, he would immediately retreat. If it was below the 5th order, he would kill him without leaving anything behind. But after seeing the other party's aura, Lu Yi furrowed his brow. Judging from the luster of the aura, it was only a 2nd order spirit stream realm cultivator, but what puzzled him was that this person's aura was very different from an ordinary 2nd order spirit stream realm cultivator. Not only was it extremely pure, it also gave off a very solid feeling. It wasn't easy to find you. The newcomer stopped 10 feet away from Lu Yi and smiled. In the dark night, his white teeth were extremely conspicuous. The other party wasn't very old. Lu Yi felt that he was 1 or 2 years younger than himself, and his figure wasn't very burly either. However, it was this person who stood there so casually that Lu Yi couldn't help but feel tense. Over the past few days, he had fought many battles with the 9-star sect's cultivators. Although he could not accurately judge whether a cultivator could pose a threat to him, he still had a vague feeling. The fact that this second-order cultivator could make him tense up meant that there was something unique about him. Tiger crossing the mountain. Without waiting for Lu Ye's reply, he introduced himself, Boundless Island, Luoji. Lu Yi immediately recalled that Chu Tian had mentioned this person to him during the day. At that time, he didn't ask what kind of place Boundless Island was, but from Chu Tian's tone, it should be a very powerful force, and a cultivator from such a force must have an extraordinary background. Therefore, after the other party finished introducing himself, Lu Yi took a step forward, unsheathed his long saber, and charged straight at that person. Let's cut him down first. He could kill a 4th-order cultivator as a 2nd-order cultivator, so how could he be afraid of a 2nd-order cultivator as a 3rd-order cultivator? Lu Ye's legs, which had been imbued with spiritual power, exploded with speed. As he closed the distance of 10 zhang, Lu Ye's spiritual cavities let out an explosive sound. That was the sound of the spirit-gathering spirit pattern that he had constructed before shattering under the surging spiritual power. Brute! Luoji snorted and raised his hand unhurriedly, pointing at Lu Yi. Bai Zhua. As soon as he finished speaking, a fluorescent light appeared on his finger. The fluorescent light suddenly expanded and turned into a strong white light, illuminating the dark corridor. Lu Yi was instantly blinded by the strong light. At this moment, he felt like he was staring directly at the sun. Even though he closed his eyes immediately, he couldn't help but feel sore and tears flowing down his face. This dog called Luoji is so despicable. Lu Yi hurriedly retreated. Earth Spike! Luoji shouted again as he lifted his foot and stomped on the ground. In the next moment, an earth spike appeared out of thin air behind Lu Yi and slammed into his waist. Lu Yi, who was retreating, lost his balance from the impact. His spine was sore, and if he hadn't activated his protective spiritual energy, he would have been injured. Ice Spike! A cold aura suddenly appeared as Luoji pointed his finger at Lu Yi, and a chopstick-sized ice spike shot out like an arrow towards Lu Ye's face. Lu Yi hadn't opened his eyes yet, mainly because he had been caught off guard. Feeling the chill coming from the ice spike, he didn't even think about it and activated his spirit rune to block it in front of him. With a boom, it was as if it was not an icicle that collided with the defensive spirit rune, but a huge rock. Lu Yi was pushed back by the powerful impact, and at the same time, his face hurt. The shattered icicle had left small wounds on his face. Golden Arc. Inside the corridor, a golden crescent-shaped slash flew towards the retreating Lu Yi. Compared to the previous spirit runes, this one was particularly lethal. The golden will talisman that Lu Yi had once used was based on this golden arc slash. The attacks that came out of the golden will talisman were actually weakened golden arc slashes. In terms of power, the golden arc slash released by Luoji was even more powerful than Lu Ye's golden will talisman. If Lu Yi had been caught off guard by this attack, he would have likely been cut in half. The golden arc slash was extremely fast and arrived in front of Lu Yi in the blink of an eye. Seeing this, Luoji's mouth curled into a smile. With a loud bang, the golden arc slash was broken by Lu Ye's saber. Behind his saber, Lu Yi narrowed his eyes slightly, his expression extremely dignified. The other party was just a second-order cultivator. Lu Yi thought that even if Luoji had some kind of trick up his sleeve, he would still be able to take him down, but after exchanging a few blows, he discovered that he was wrong. This second-order cultivator was different from all the other second-order cultivators he had seen before. In the past few days, Lu Yi had killed many 9-star sect disciples and had seen how the disciples of the profound sect fought. Although they would occasionally use some spirit runes, it would take some time to prepare. There had never been a cultivator who could do what Luoji did. The other party was able to use spirit runes at will, and his attainments in them were extremely high. It was obvious that he was on the path of Tao cultivation. What surprised Lu Yi even more was that this second-order cultivator's spirit chi seemed to be even richer than his own. Before, he couldn't tell just by looking at the aura, but now that he was fighting, he could clearly see the other party's spirit chi fluctuations. It was definitely not the spirit chi fluctuations of a second-order cultivator. It was even stronger than the fourth-order cultivators he had killed before. Putting everything together, Lu Yi immediately thought of a possibility. This guy cultivates a heaven-grade secret art. Chapter 80. Secret arts were divided into heaven, earth, profound, and yellow grade. Yellow grade secret arts could only allow one to cultivate up to the third-order spirit stream realm, profound grade secret arts could allow one to reach the sixth order, and earth grade secret arts could allow one to reach the ninth order. There were only 9 layers of the spirit stream realm. Logically speaking, an earth grade cultivation technique was enough to allow a spirit stream realm cultivator to cultivate to the Great Circle. In reality, this was not the case. Earth-grade techniques could only allow a cultivator to open 180 acupoints, but the human body had 360 acupoints. After cultivating to 180 apertures, if he wanted to open more spiritual apertures, he would have to switch to a heaven-grade cultivation method. A ninth-order spirit stream realm cultivator who cultivated an earth-grade secret art and opened 180 apertures would be able to open 181 apertures after switching to a heaven-grade secret art. However, switching to a heaven-grade secret art would cause the cultivator's original realm to drop by several levels. In the classification of heaven-grade secret arts, 180 apertures was only the level of a sixth-order spirit stream realm cultivator. In short, the number of spiritual cavities a cultivator had opened wasn't the standard to judge their cultivation, but rather the number of small circulatory cycles in their body. Cultivators with the same number of spiritual cavities may not necessarily have the same level of cultivation. In one of the only times he had imparted the Tao to Lu Yi, the headmaster had told him about the differences between cultivation methods, so he remembered these things. This Luo Ji seemed to be only a second-order spirit stream realm cultivator, but in reality, he had opened at least 50 spirit apertures. This was because his spiritual power fluctuations were much stronger than Lu Ye's. For a heaven-grade secret art, opening 18 apertures was the first order, and opening 45 apertures was the second order. After realizing this, Lu Yi immediately understood that Luo Ji was the strongest opponent he had ever faced. It had to be known that under an earth-grade secret art, opening 45 apertures was the standard for a fourth-order spirit stream realm cultivator. In other words, Luo Ji, who cultivated a heaven-grade secret art and was only a second-order spirit stream realm cultivator, had a cultivation between the fourth-order and fifth-order spirit stream realm. Coupled with his attainments in spirit arts, even an ordinary fifth-order spirit stream realm cultivator would not be afraid. This was the foundation of a disciple from a top sect. When they were very young, they began to determine their future path, and continued to research and explore on this path, tempering their bodies. When they reached a suitable age, they would begin to cultivate. They would not be in a hurry to increase their cultivation, because every time they wanted to increase their cultivation, they would need to open 2 or 3 times more spiritual cavities than ordinary cultivators. When such a person's cultivation wasn't high, he could often fight people who were 2 or 3 levels above him. Even if his cultivation had increased, it was still common for him to kill people who were a higher level than him. Once such people grew up, they would definitely become overlord-level experts. Lu Yi was honored to meet a future overlord. The brief exchange ended with his complete defeat. When Luo Ji appeared, Ling Xian rushed up to him. However, after a few spells, he was forced back to his original position. For a weapon cultivator like him to fight against a Dharma cultivator, close combat was the way to go. However, Luo Ji was obviously not that easy to get close to. "Which sect are you from, you brute?" Luo Ji did not pursue him because he was confident in his victory. It was not that he looked down on Lu Yi, but the environment here was not suitable for a weapon cultivator like Lu Yi to perform. Instead, it would make his spells more threatening. In the early stages of cultivation, it was very advantageous to be able to use spells. However, the passageway here was so narrow that Lu Yi could not move at all. Lu Yi obviously realized this. At this moment, retreating from the exit at the back was the right way. However, he did not intend to do so. Because he had a vague feeling that if he retreated now, he would not have the courage to face Luoji the next time he saw him. From this guy's first sentence, Ling Xian could infer that he was here specifically to find him. There was no way to avoid him. Then he could only fight. His opponent had a good foundation, but did he not have one? In the end, Luoji was only using some small spells. Ling Xian's defensive spiritual tattoos could block them. Lu Yi tightened his grip on the saber and leaned forward slightly. He shifted his center of gravity and assumed the posture of a cheetah pouncing on its prey. Ling Xian took a deep breath and the spiritual power in the 3 small circulatory systems in his body began to surge and roar. The next moment, he dashed forward and the stones under his feet splashed. Bai Zhua! Luoji shouted. Lu Ye's eyes were still sore from the previous loss. Therefore, when he heard Luoji's shout, he immediately narrowed his eyes and raised his left hand to block in front of his eyes. However, there was no strong explosion of light. Instead, an icicle full of coldness attacked him. At the same time, Luoji's mocking laughter sounded, "I lied to you. Son of a bitch." Lu Yi was furious. He finally understood why this guy had to shout every time he released a spell. It turned out that he was preparing for this moment. He was really insidious. He raised his saber and slashed out. The icicle was broken. However, immediately after that, more icicles attacked him. The sound of breaking air could not be heard. Luoji didn't seem to need to rest to release spells. If he hadn't seen it with his own eyes, Lu Yi would have suspected that this guy was secretly activating an ice talisman. Clanging sounds could be heard. Lu Ye's saber danced and shattered the icicles one by one. He could only block those that he couldn't destroy in time. He struggled to advance. Because of the large amount of ice shards, the tunnel began to become cold. After a full 10 breaths, Lu Yi had only moved 3 steps forward. The icicles flew towards him with great force, hindering his advance. Behind Luoji, Yi's small head suddenly popped out. However, before she could move, Luoji turned his head as if he had eyes on the back of his head. At the same time, he raised his hand and a golden arc slashed towards Yi. Yi screamed and quickly retracted her head. Roar! Hoopa roared. He thought that Yi had been injured. This tiger roar was clearly different from the others. When the tiger roar sounded, Lu Yi felt as if someone had smashed his head with a small hammer. Luoji, who was standing opposite him, even staggered a step. He muttered in surprise, "A strange beast." He had seen Hoopa before, but he didn't pay much attention to him. Only now did he realize that this handsome white tiger seemed to have some special abilities. He didn't have time to think because while he was distracted by Hoopa's roar, Lu Yi took advantage of the situation to rush over. Luoji roared, "Bai Zhua." After falling for it once, how could Lu Yi fall for it again? He narrowed his eyes and charged forward without a care. Kacha, the shattered ice shards suddenly wrapped around Lu Yi and quickly condensed. It seemed that they wanted to freeze Lu Yi inside. At this critical moment, Lu Yi had no choice but to retreat. Just as he steadied himself, a large block of ice appeared between him and Luoji. If he hadn't run quickly, the block of ice would have wrapped around him. Once that happened, with Luoji's methods, Lu Yi was dead for sure. Phew! Seeing Lu Yi blocked by the ice block, Luoji breathed a sigh of relief. The intensity of this battle had exceeded his expectations. Originally, when 9 Stars Sect had asked him to deal with Lu Yi, he had thought it would be a simple matter. Even if the other party came from a top force, his strength was obvious. A third-order spirit stream realm cultivator who cultivated an ordinary secret art wasn't something he would put in his eyes. However, after really fighting, Luo Ji discovered that this third order was somewhat different from the third order he had encountered before. Chapter 81. With Luo Ji's current strength, he could kill an ordinary third-order cultivator with 2 or 3 spirit techniques at most, but he had already used countless spirit techniques in his fight with Lu Yi. What surprised him in particular was that this tiger could fight with spirit tattoos. Studying spirit tattoos was several times more difficult than studying spirit techniques because constructing spirit tattoos was a very delicate job. The slightest mistake would lead to failure, let alone activating spirit tattoos in battle. Generally, only a fairly experienced spirit tattooist had such capital. But how old was Lu Yi? Through observation, Luo Ji determined that Lu Yi had mastered a defensive spirit tattoo, which could block his ice all technique and could be used at will. This discovery inevitably made Luo Ji put away his contempt. What his senior brothers said before he went out was right. He couldn't be careless and couldn't underestimate any enemy. Lu Yi might not have opened as many spirit cavities as he did, and he might not have as many means as he did, but the spirit tattoo technique alone was not something an ordinary person could possess. However, Luo Ji didn't flinch because of this. On the contrary, his fighting spirit was high. These days in the outer circle, no one he met could arouse his fighting spirit. It was rare to meet such a well-matched opponent, so how could he miss it? Just as he was thinking, a bright blade suddenly flashed in front of him, accompanied by a cracking sound. A huge block of ice was broken from the middle, and from the gap, a figure rushed out. Ice prison technique was broken just like that. Luo Ji's face was filled with surprise. That was not an ordinary ice block, but a spell. It was a spell he had created based on the icicle technique. Although it could not trap Lu Yi, it should not have been broken so easily. This made him realize that the spirit artifact in Lu Ye's hand was extraordinary. He definitely couldn't withstand such a strike. His spirit chi surged as he launched another spirit technique, one after another, towards Lu Yi. Lu Yi charged forward. This time, he didn't use his saber to slash apart those spells, nor did he dodge. Instead, he forcefully charged forward. All the spells that came at him were blocked by his defensive spirit runes. In the dark corridor, light constantly bloomed, and the distance between them was rapidly closing. Luo Ji's eyelids twitched as he secretly cursed Lu Yi for being a brainless brute. However, it was undeniable that this boorish fellow's response had caused him to panic. In a battle between a weapon cultivator and a Dharma cultivator, the Dharma cultivator would have the upper hand if there was a distance between them. However, once the Dharma cultivator was closed in, the Dharma cultivator would usually not have a good ending. In just 3 breaths of time, Lu Yi was only 2 feet away from Luo Ji. The long saber in his hand flashed as he slashed out. Luo Ji hurriedly retreated, but at this moment, Yi appeared behind him again. Her figure quickly solidified, and she raised her hand and slapped Luo Ji on the shoulder. Luo Ji was scared out of his wits, but he soon realized that this palm didn't have much lethality and was easily blocked by his protective spiritual energy. Suddenly, the spirit light on his back shone brightly. The spirit light was extremely sharp and pierced into his back like sharp thorns. Yi, who was about to strike him with another palm, immediately cried out in pain and dodged. However, after being blocked by her, Luo Ji had nowhere to run. If it was an attack from any other third-order master, Luo Ji was confident he could block it with his body-protecting spirit chi, but he had seen Lu Yi break through the ice prison technique, so how could he dare be careless? Fog shield. Luo Ji shouted as his spirit chi surged and his body was immediately wrapped in a layer of misty spirit chi. Lu Ye's saber slashed down, but even with its sharpness, it still couldn't break through the fog shield. He felt like he had struck a piece of rubber and his long saber was stuck inside. Luo Ji retreated while raising his hand to point at Lu Yi and grit his teeth, golden lightning. This time, it was Lu Ye's turn to be unable to dodge. The golden half-moon slash hit Lu Ye's chest, but before that, he had already activated his spirit inscription to protect himself. Lu Yi slashed down with his saber again. Ice spike. Wind blade. Thunder halberd. Inside the corridor, Luo Ji's angry roars continued to echo. Accompanied by his shouts, different types of spirit chi techniques were constantly launched, causing Lu Ye's chest to pound. He seemed to be full of momentum, but in reality, he was retreating step by step. Because of the pressure from Lu Ye's saber, the fog shield around his body began to show signs of collapse. I don't believe you can maintain this kind of spirit inscription forever. Luo Ji roared as he fought with Lu Yi. Although he was shocked that Lu Yi could fight with spirit inscriptions, the consumption of spirit chi to activate them was very high. As long as Lu Ye's spirit chi was exhausted, he would win. The brute opposite him was like a mute, not saying a word, but attacking more and more fiercely. After a while, the corners of Luo Ji's eyes twitched. He felt that the situation was not good. Lu Yi consumed a lot of spirit chi to activate his spirit inscriptions, and so did Luo Ji's spirit chi. He did have more spirit chi than Lu Yi, but he had more spirit chi to activate. And because he had to guard against EE, he had to maintain his fog shield, which consumed even more spirit chi. If this continued, it was really hard to say who would be the first to break. Thinking quickly, Luo Ji roared, "Bai Zhua." When he raised his hand, a spirit talisman appeared at his fingertips, and he poured his spirit chi into it. Lu Yi felt that he could not hold on any longer. He had not fought with Luo Ji for long, at most half a cup of tea's time, but in such a short time, his spirit chi had been depleted. This was the most intense battle he had encountered so far, and his opponent was only a second-order cultivator. So, when Luo Ji shouted Bai Zhua's name, he knew that there was a trap. His body suddenly jumped back, and at the same time, he touched the storage bag at his waist and pinched a spirit talisman at his fingertips. Their eyes met, and they were both stunned. As their spirit chi surged, the two spirit talismans bloomed at the same time. Water spears appeared, and 3 water spears shot towards Lu Yi in a triangular formation. Fire snakes surged and swayed, burning towards Luo Ji. With a loud bang, the corridor shook violently, and gravel rustled down. The collision of water and fire created a large amount of hot gas in the corridor. Lu Yi and Luo Ji's bodies flashed with light, and they were both sent flying by the powerful impact. Both of them cursed in their hearts, and stood up with a gloomy face. By the time Lu Yi chased after them with his saber, Luo Ji had already escaped from the corridor. He turned around and shot a spirit talisman at Lu Yi. Lu Ye's head shrank back, and the spirit talisman exploded with golden light, hitting the ground around them. When he looked again, Luo Ji had already run far away. Lu Yi chased after him, and Hupa also caught up from behind. Lu Yi jumped onto the tiger's back, and his speed increased sharply. Luo Ji, who was running away, looked back and was so angry that his nose became crooked. Seeing that he couldn't escape, he simply stopped running and turned to face Lu Yi. He pinched a spirit talisman in each hand, and he slapped one of them on his body. Immediately, he was covered in a layer of golden light. This was a golden body talisman, and its quality was good. At the same time, he threw the other spirit talisman at Lu Yi. Lu Yi jumped off the tiger's back and slashed his saber at the incoming attack. At the same time, he warned Hupa, "Stay away." The huge impact made him fall to the ground, and his whole body was sore. When he stood up, he saw Luo Ji standing in the same place, provocatively beckoning him with his finger, "Come." Lu Yi didn't say a word. He took out a golden body talisman from his storage bag and slapped it on himself. Luo Ji couldn't help but sigh. The other party's financial resources didn't seem to be weaker than his own. Chapter 82. In the gorge, the two sides, who had little spirit chi left, began to use their spirit talismans. Various kinds of spirit talismans were constantly activated, flashing with colorful light. The noise spread in all directions, attracting the attention of the cultivators from the two nearby sects, but after observing the situation from a distance, no one dared to step forward. The intensity of this battle was beyond their ability to intervene. If they were accidentally involved, they would die without a doubt. A fifth-order cultivator might be able to intervene in such a battle, but the two sects did not have many fifth-order cultivators. Since the start of the battle, the fifth-order cultivators on both sides had been suppressing each other in the center of the heaven-splitting gorge, unable to move. This was also the reason why Lu Yi had not encountered a single fifth-order cultivator in the past few days. At this moment, the sky was bright and Lu Yi was gasping for breath. He had not expected the battle to turn out like this, but the dawn of victory was right in front of him because he found that his opponent did not seem to have any offensive spirit talismans left. This was a matter of course. Luo Ji himself was a spirit cultivator and was proficient in all kinds of low-level spirit techniques. The spirit techniques he used were even more powerful than ordinary spirit talismans. He had less than 10 offensive spirit talismans on him, most of them were for defensive use. In the fierce battle with Lu Yi, he had basically used all of his offensive spirit talismans, which made him feel ashamed. In his mind, a true spirit cultivator should disdain using spirit talismans, it was a sign of incompetence. But now, if he was incompetent, then he was incompetent. It was better than being killed by that brute. Seeing Lu Yi raise his saber and attack, Luo Ji suddenly felt something was wrong and turned around to run. However, the sound of pursuit behind him was getting closer and closer. Turning his head, he saw Lu Yi riding on the back of the big white tiger. Shameless! Luo Ji cursed in his heart and shouted angrily, "Don't chase, or I'll teach you a lesson." How could Lu Yi take such a childish threat to heart? The big white tiger chased even more fiercely. "You forced me to do this," Luo Ji grit his teeth and turned around to face Lu Yi, reaching out and taking something out of his storage bag. Lu Yi did not know what the other party had taken out, but Luo Ji's attitude made him feel uneasy. Just as he was thinking this, Luo Ji tossed out the item in his hand. Lu Yi looked at it and found that it was a square seal, about the size of a palm. It was completely white, and it was unknown what material it was made of. However, in the next moment, his blood ran cold. This was because the tiny seal had suddenly enlarged to the size of a table. Then, it ferociously charged towards Hu Pa. Hu Pa was also agile. He forcibly changed the direction of his movement and dodged to the side with Lu Yi. With a loud boom, a 2-foot-deep pit appeared where the seal had landed, the earth trembled. Seeing this scene, Lu Ye's eyelids twitched. This thing was definitely an incredible spirit tool. If it had been imprinted on, he and Hu Pa would probably have been turned into minced meat. Hu Pa tried to bring Lu Yi to attack Luo Ji. However, although the seal looked clumsy, it was actually very agile. It pressed down from the sky again and again. Hu dodged pathetically. There were a few times when he almost failed to dodge. "Run!" Lu Yi shouted from Hu Pa's back. Hu also knew that the situation was not good. He turned around and fled with Lu Yi. "Where do you think you're going?" Luo Ji was unforgiving. A deranged smile appeared on his face. "Weren't you having fun chasing me just now? Let's fight to the death, you brute." The situation had reversed. Earlier, Lu Yi had been chasing Luo Ji. Now, it was Luo Ji who was chasing Lu Yi. It could only be said that the heavens would not spare anyone. Boom, 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 every time the seal fell, the earth would tremble and rocks would fly. This thing should be Luo Ji's life-saving spirit tool. He had not used it before because he was confident in his own strength and also because of his own pride. However, after being forced to a dead end by Lu Yi, he had completely unshackled his body and mind. He had already used his spirit talisman. Was there a need to use his spirit tool? The speed at which the large seal fell became faster and faster, and the enormous impact caused Hu Po's fleeing figure to become more and more disheveled. Finally, at one point, Hu Po staggered and fell to the ground from the impact, and the large seal fell with its shadow. Hu Po hurriedly got up, but it was too late. At the critical moment of life and death, Lu Yi activated what little spiritual power he had left and quickly formed a defensive spirit tattoo above him. When the seal fell, the defensive spirit tattoo only lasted for a moment before shattering. However, immediately after, a second defensive spirit tattoo was formed. When it shattered, a third appeared. Finally, the seal was stopped. The two sides were in a stalemate for a moment. The light on the seal began to dim and quickly shrank. It returned to its original appearance with all its luster gone. Lu Yi raised his hand and grabbed at the seal. However, his hand, which was trembling violently due to fatigue, grabbed empty air. The seal fell on his head, causing a bump to appear on his forehead. However, it did not have the same power as before. With a loud laugh from afar, the seal flew back and landed in Luo Ji's hand. At this moment, they were 300 feet apart. Luo Ji leaned against a rock without a care for his image. He laughed as he looked at Lu Yi, as if he had won. The gorge between the two was filled with huge pits. The aftermath of the fierce battle had subsided. However, the battle was not over. Lu Yi struggled to stand up and walked step by step toward Luo Ji. Luo Ji could no longer laugh. However, before he could take a few steps, Lu Yi fell to the ground, causing a cloud of dust to rise. Yi floated out from the side and helped Lu Yi up. Their eyes met, asking for advice. Lu Yi slowly shook his head. Yi wanted to cooperate with Hu Pe and see if they could kill Luo Ji while he was in a weakened state. However, Lu Yi felt that although Luo Ji looked like a lamp that had run out of oil, he could at least cast 1 or 2 spells. That seal of his was also a problem. He had activated 3 defensive spirit tattoo and had almost failed to block it, not to mention Hu Pe and Yi. If they were hit by this thing, they would lose their lives. There was no doubt that Luo Ji was a sinister fellow. This could be seen from his various actions during the previous battle. How could such a person, knowing that Lu Yi had 2 helpers, let himself be like a lamp that had run out of oil? Lu Yi even suspected that even if he could walk in front of Luo Ji, he would not be able to kill him. Luo Ji was truly a lamp that had run out of oil. In the distance, Luo Ji coldly watched for a while. Seeing that Yi and Hu Pe did not take the opportunity to attack, a trace of hidden disappointment flashed through his eyes. At the same time, he sighed in relief. Just as Lu Yi expected, he looked like he had no strength to fight. However, if Yi and Hu Pe dared to approach him, then he did not mind showing them the power of a disciple from a top sect. The current situation was undoubtedly the best. He didn't need to waste the last of his strength on an insignificant helper. Raising his head, he called out to Lu Yi, "I'll recover a little, then I'll come and kill you." Chapter 83. Inside 9-Star Sect Station, Chao Yi and Dong Shai were waiting together. Last night, they had received news that Luo Ji and Tiger Crossing Mountain had fought. One of them was a 2nd order and the other was a 3rd order, but their battle was comparable to that of an ordinary 5th order. The news that followed surprised them. Luo Ji, who they had high hopes for, had not been able to quickly defeat his opponent and was instead locked in a fierce battle. Worthy of being a disciple from a top sect, he was not easy to kill. If it was an ordinary dispute, 9-Star Sect would not hold on to this matter, but they had to avenge their young master, so they could only continue to wait. At that moment, Dong Shuye's face suddenly changed. "The result is out?" Chao Yi asked nervously. "No, it's that cheap maidservant beside Wang Yang. She left Xian Sect Station. She wouldn't want to deal with Luo Ji, right?" Chao Yi was shocked. "I don't know, but we can't rule out that possibility. You'll need to go." Chao Ye's face twitched. Although he was also a 6th order, he was not that cheap maidservant's opponent. Every time he fought with her, he could not escape a beating. There was nothing he could do about it. He walked the path of a body cultivator while that woman was an elemental cultivator, so she naturally had an advantage. In the past 2 years, they had fought many times, and each time he was beaten black and blue. So, He really did not want to face that maidservant named Xiao Zhu, but since Dong Shuyi had spoken, he could only bite the bullet and accept. In any case, it was just another beating. With such a mood, Chao Yi strode out with a resolute look on his face, as if he was going to go even if there were millions of people around him. Dong Shuyi watched him leave and could not help but sigh. Chu Tian was recuperating in a secluded place with a group of junior brothers and junior sisters when a woman with 2 buns suddenly walked over. Senior sister Xiao Zhu. Chu Tian's eyes were sharp and he quickly greeted her. Xiao Zhu stepped forward and asked, "What's the situation?" She was not asking about Chu Tian and the others, but Lu Yi. Since 9-Star Sect could receive news of the battle between Lu Yi and Luo Ji, Xian's sect naturally could as well, so now everyone knew that these 2 top sect disciples had met and were fighting endlessly. Chu Tian said with a sigh, "Their brains are about to come out." Senior sister Xiao Zhu, "Those 2 guys are simply not human." "Who has the upper hand?" Xiao Zhu asked. Chu Tian shook his head, "It's the same. Sometimes it's this one chasing that one, sometimes it's that one chasing that one. They have been fighting since last night." Xiao Zhu frowned. "It's not like they're always fighting. They'll occasionally stop to recover, but they'll soon start fighting again." Chu Tian had clearly gathered quite a bit of information. This recovery ability. Xiao Zhu was secretly shocked. For a 2nd or 3rd order cultivator, this kind of recovery ability was truly abnormal. Ordinary people would not be able to withstand such a long battle. "Where are they?" Xiao Zhu asked. Chu Tian immediately pointed out the direction and Xiao Zhu left. A moment later, Lu Yi and Luo Ji, who were fighting fiercely, turned their heads at the same time, vigilantly looking in one direction. This battle was extremely intense. Previously, everyone was like a lamp that had run out of oil. Then, each of them recovered for a while. However, they did not recover for long, at most 2 hours. Then, Luo Ji took the initiative to attack Lu Yi, igniting the second battle. However, this time, the 2 did not use any spirit talismans to attack, mainly because they had used up all their offensive spirit talismans and only had a few defensive spirit talismans left. Luo Ji also did not use his Great Seal spirit artifact. It consumed too much of his spirit chi and he could not support it for too long. If he could not quickly finish off Lu Yi, he could only wait for death. During this time, he did not even use any other spirit techniques. He only used the icicle technique to fight Lu Yi because it was his most proficient and also the one that consumed the least spirit chi. There was no grudge between them, and they had never even met before. However, in the spirit stream battlefield, it had nothing to do with gratitude or grudges. It was only about which side they belonged to. Because they belonged to different sides, it was a reason to fight. Under the gazes of 2 pairs of eyes, a petite figure walked out. Luo Ji immediately tensed up because he could tell that this person was not from 9-Star Sect. But soon, he relaxed. After this woman appeared, another burly figure also appeared. It was 9-Star Sect's Chao Yi. The sudden appearance of these 2 6th-order cultivators here made him a little confused. Casting a questioning look towards Chao Yi shook his head, motioning him not to act rashly before standing beside him. Luo Ji immediately understood that Chao Yi had come to restrain the other party. Taking advantage of this opportunity, he quickly sat down cross-legged and took out a spirit pill to refine. On the other side, although Lu Yi did not know what was going on, seeing Luo Ji's actions, he also took a spirit pill and took out a large piece of beast meat, stuffed it into his mouth, and threw a large piece to De Hu. Xiao Zhu walked over to Lu Yi, a little speechless, and stood not far from him before introducing herself, "I am Chu Tian's senior sister." Lu Yi naturally did not believe her so easily and immediately sent a message to Chu Tian to inquire. After receiving confirmation, he nodded slightly and asked, "What's the matter?" At the same time, he looked her up and down, his eyes sweeping over her full chest. He couldn't help feeling a little strange. Why was this woman dressed like a maidservant? Give me 2 spirit stones, Xiao Zhu said. Oh. What? Lu Yi wondered if he had heard wrong. 2 spirit stones. Xiao Zhu repeated. Lu Yi was confused by her. This woman ran over to him and asked for 2 spirit stones. What did she mean? Was she robbing him? That didn't make sense. After pondering for a moment, Lu Yi took out 2 spirit stones from his storage bag and threw them to her. Xiao Zhu caught them and threw a jade slip to Lu Yi. I'll sell them to you. Lu Yi frowned as he took the jade slip. After a brief examination, he immediately understood what this woman meant. This was a cultivation technique, and it was an earth-grade cultivation technique. 2 spirit stones naturally could not buy an earth-grade secret art. This was obviously a goodwill from the profound sect. No matter what, he had saved the lives of some profound sect disciples these days. This was an unexpected surprise. He had contacted Chu Tian before to buy a profound grade secret art. Now that he had an earth grade secret art, it was naturally better. It would allow him to open all the way to 180 apertures. This would save him the trouble of looking for a secret art after reaching the 6th order spirit stream realm. Many thanks. Lu Yi thanked her. Xiao Zhu did not mind. She turned around and looked at Chao Yi, who was not far away, with a smile on her face. Chao Ye's scalp went numb as some unpleasant memories surfaced in his mind. However, Luo Ji was right beside him, so he could not show weakness. He took a step forward and said, "Let's go somewhere else." Xiao Zhu's smile grew wider. That's exactly what I was thinking. In the next moment, Chao Yi turned around and flew away at an extremely fast speed. Xiao Zhu took a step forward and chased after him. Soon, the two disappeared. Lu Yi swallowed the food in his mouth and charged towards Luo Ji with a flick of his long saber. At the same time, in various parts of the heaven-splitting gorge, battles far more intense than before broke out. The cultivators of the 2 great sects fought to the death, their life auras constantly being annihilated. Chapter 84. 3 days later, on both sides of the messy battlefield, Lu Yi and Luo Ji stood a few dozen meters apart, each of them recovering. Over the past 3 days, the two had fought more than a dozen times, several times a day, but so far, there had been no clear victor. 3 days of fighting had exhausted Lu Yi both physically and mentally. He hadn't even slept much over the past 3 days, so he couldn't understand how this guy named Luo Ji could recover so quickly. In this battle, both sides had used all their cards, and in a head-on confrontation, neither side could do anything to the other. Now, it was a matter of who could last longer, so recovery speed was particularly important. In the same period of time, whichever side could recover more spirit chi would continue to accumulate an advantage. With the assistance of the gluttonous meal, Lu Yi could refine spirit pills twice as fast as normal, and when he rested, he would construct spirit-gathering spirit crests in his spirit apertures to absorb the surrounding world energy. With these 2 methods, it could be said that Lu Ye's recovery speed had reached an astonishing level. Even an average 6th order master might not be able to recover as fast as him. Luo Ji, who had the same doubts as Lu Yi, couldn't help cursing in his heart. How could this brute recover so quickly? Although he was only a 2nd order spirit stream realm cultivator, he had already opened 55 apertures, almost twice as many as Lu Yi. On top of that, the spirit pill he took was not an ordinary profound spirit pill, but a special small revitalizing pill from Boundless Island. This spirit pill was not much different from the profound spirit pill when used for cultivation, but if used solely for recovery, its effect was about 30% better. While recovering, Luo Ji also used spirit stones, grabbing one in each hand and desperately swallowing the spirit chi inside. Even with all 3 methods, Luo Ji still couldn't gain any advantage. He really couldn't understand what was going on. Compared with Lu Yi, Luo Ji had less time to rest, barely closing his eyes over the past 3 days because he was constantly harassed by Hupa and Yi. In a head-on battle, Hupa and Yi couldn't help much, but if it was just harassment, they had no problem. After recovering for about 2 hours, Lu Yi opened his eyes, and as usual, another round of fighting began. Sure enough, opposite him, Luo Ji also opened his eyes, stood up, and walked towards Lu Yi step by step. He didn't want to get close to Lu Yi, but the distance between them was a bit far. He needed to walk to a suitable distance to cast spells. On the other side, Lu Yi rode on Hupa and rushed toward Luo Ji. He pointed his long saber at the ground, ready to attack. Luo Ji stood still. His hands flashed as he prepared a spell. It was at this moment that he suddenly frowned and sensed something. He raised his hand and said, "Wait a minute." Lu Yi frowned, but still had Hupa stop. Luo Ji dissipated the spiritual light in his hand and panted. "I'm not fighting anymore. You win." Lu Yi stared at him, wondering what this guy was up to. As if to reassure Lu Yi, Luo Ji took the initiative to explain, "The declaration of war between the Xian sect and the Jiuxing clan has ended. The Jiuxing clan is no match for the Xian sect and has retreated. So, I have to go." He was originally invited by Jiuxing sect to deal with Lu Yi. Now that Jiuxing sect had lost, there was no longer any meaning for him to continue staying here. Of course, Lu Yi wouldn't believe his nonsense so easily. After a few days of fighting, he was more and more certain that Luo Ji was a sly little bee **starred. So, he immediately used the battlefield imprint to contact Chu Tian and ask about the situation. Chu Tian replied quickly, his tone full of joy. He confirmed Luo Ji's words. In this battle, the Xian sect had won the final victory. This wasn't strange. Although the two sects were one level apart, in the spirit stream realm, the Xian sect was stronger. The Jiuxing clan was originally no match for them. Lu Yi had also killed many Jiuxing clan cultivators, increasing the Xian sect's advantage. Over the past few days, the Xian sect had been accumulating advantages in small-scale battles. In the end, they had won the battle in one fell swoop, forcing the Jiuxing clan cultivators to retreat to their base. At this point, the battle between the two sects had come to an end. "How was it?" Luo Ji asked after Lu Yi finished contacting Chu Tian. Lu Yi nodded slightly. He exerted some force in his legs and Hupa shot forward, quickly closing in on Luo Ji. "You?" Luo Ji was shocked. He couldn't figure out what Lu Yi was thinking. The battle between the two sects had already ended. There was no point in them continuing to fight here. Therefore, he didn't know why Lu Yi wanted to rush over. But there was no time to think about this. Seeing the tiger carrying Lu Yi quickly approaching, Luo Ji had no choice but to use his ice edge technique. Lu Yi tilted his head, avoiding the incoming ice edge. He jumped off the tiger's back and slashed down with his long saber. He revealed a rare evil grin. "When the battle begins, you decide. When it ends, I decide." Luo Ji had suddenly come to fight him to the death. They had fought for 3 days in a row. He was furious and had consumed a lot of energy. A few days ago, he had accumulated a lot of spirit dawn. But in the past few days, he only had 30 left. In these 3 days, he couldn't even cultivate. He had wasted a lot of time. This kind of loss couldn't be made up for by Luo Ji's, "You win." If he didn't vent his anger, how could he let Luo Ji leave? After fighting for 3 days, they were already familiar with each other's methods. Luo Ji wouldn't have let Lu Yi get close to him so easily. But he didn't expect Lu Yi to be so persistent. It was too late for him to retreat. When the long saber slashed down, Luo Ji had already put a golden body talisman on his body. The long saber enhanced with sharpness spirit tattoos hit the layer of golden light but couldn't completely break it. Instead, a large seal suddenly appeared. It grew to the size of a table and pressed down on Lu Yi. Lu Yi hurriedly retreated, and a huge pit immediately appeared where he stood. The ground trembled, and by the time he steadied himself, Luo Ji had already opened up a distance of 30 meters from him. He had even forced back Hupa and Yi's joint sneak attack. Luo Ji didn't dare to use the power of the seal a second time because it consumed too much energy. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Lu Yi stomped his feet and rushed toward Luo Ji again. His body swayed to avoid the attack of the icicles. Occasionally, the light of the defense spirit tattoos flashed on his body. He could win. After a few more battles, he could kill Luo Ji. Although Luo Ji's recovery speed was basically the same as his, or even faster than his, Luo Ji had taken too many elixirs these days. When a cultivator took a large number of elixirs in a short period of time, the only consequence was that his spiritual energy would become obscure. Especially for a spell cultivator like Luo Ji, if his spiritual energy wasn't pure enough, it would be fatal. The power of the spells he cast would be weaker and the casting time would be longer. Lu Yi had clearly noticed this. This was the reason why he insisted on continuing to fight. He didn't need to kill Luo Ji this time. He only needed to force him to continuously consume his spiritual energy and take elixirs to replenish it. Luo Ji would become weaker and weaker. One day, he would be able to kill this guy. Chapter 85. However, the battle did not continue. In the middle of the battle, Luo Ji shouted, "Use money to buy your life." He clearly realized his own problem. Continuing to fight like this wasn't a solution. Although Lu Yi wouldn't be able to kill him in a short period of time, as long as he continued to delay like this, his situation would only become worse and worse. Eventually, he wouldn't be a match for Lu Yi. Lu Yi was stunned by this shout. He pointed his sword forward and said, "I want your seal." The seal was definitely a good spiritual weapon. It was probably more valuable than the small bell he got from the Joshing sect's young master. Luo Ji chuckled and prepared a spell in his hand. "Let's fight to the death, now." "Now? What can you give me?" Lu Yi asked in a low voice. It was not that he had to kill Luo Ji. He just felt that he had lost too much in the 3 days of battle. If Luo Ji could make up for his losses, he could stop the battle. Of course, the main reason was that if they really fought to the death, even if he could kill Luo Ji, he would have to pay a huge price. Luo Ji would not be stupid enough to keep fighting with him. Before the situation worsened to the point of no return, Luo Ji would fight to the death. Luo Ji took the seal out of his storage pouch and held it up. "It's all yours." So sincere. Lu Yi was surprised. However, considering Luo Ji's consumption over the past few days, there might not be many good things left in the storage pouch. At most, there would be some spiritual stones and spiritual pills left. Since Luo Ji was so straightforward, Lu Yi could not force him. If he continued, it would only be a life and death struggle. So, after some thought, he nodded. "Okay." Luo Ji tossed the storage pouch forward. He didn't even ask Lu Yi to swear an oath of heavenly secrets. In his opinion, although they were on different sides, they were all disciples of top forces. They still had this bit of credibility. "I've never known you. What's your name?" "Yi." Luo Ji nodded and looked deeply at Lu Yi. It was as if he wanted to remember Lu Ye's appearance deep in his soul. Then, he dragged his tired body and walked out of the valley. Lu Yi did not take the opportunity to launch a sneak attack. Luo Ji was defenseless. However, the seal in his hand was still blooming. Lu Yi was forcing Luo Ji to fight to the death. After walking some distance, Luo Ji raised his head to look at the sky, his face filled with grief. It was a huge loss. Losing the items in his storage pouch wasn't important. As a disciple of Boundless Island, he didn't care about those things. The key was that he had consumed too many spirit pills recently, causing the spiritual energy in his body to be muddled. Without a month of recuperation, he wouldn't be able to recover. In other words, he could forget about cultivating for the next month. For a low-level cultivator, this would undoubtedly have a huge impact, especially for a cultivator of his background. However, a loss was a loss. He would not blame the heavens and accuse others. Their cultivations were still low, and they would meet again in the future. Next time, he would get back at them. It was only when Luo Ji's figure disappeared from sight that Lu Yi let out a long sigh of relief. He called out to Hu Pe and leaped onto the tiger's back. Under Hu Pe's guidance, they found a tunnel to rest in. It was finally over. This battle had exhausted him mentally and physically. Although Lu Yi had only been cultivating for a short period of time, he had experienced many battles, and he had never encountered such a difficult opponent. In the end, when Luo Ji wanted to stop the battle, he readily admitted defeat. However, in reality, Lu Yi had lost. This was because he had two helpers, Hu Pe and Yi, while Luo Ji had been fighting alone. In a head-on confrontation, Hu Pe and Yi were unable to do much due to their fear of the Great Seal's power. However, they could still occasionally launch sneak attacks. Furthermore, with Hu Pe and Yi keeping Luo Ji busy, Luo Ji had no time to sleep in the past 3 days. On the other hand, Lu Yi had secretly slept a few times. It could be said that if Lu Yi was also alone, he wouldn't have been able to gain any advantage in this battle. These cultivators from the top sects were indeed extraordinary. This confrontation with Luo Ji also taught him a lesson, which was that he could never judge a cultivator's strength based on his cultivation level. He wasn't even in the mood to check Luo Ji's storage pouch. Lu Yi ate the jerky and fell asleep. Hu Pe and Yi glanced at each other and went to the two ends of the tunnel. Although the battle between the Zhoxing sect and the Xian sect had ended and Luo Ji had retreated, there was a high probability that there would be no danger. However, they still needed to be vigilant. Lu Yi was awakened by the movement in the battlefield imprint. He opened his eyes and frowned. He was confused for a while and felt a little grumpy when he woke up. It was the kind of thing that displeased him. After being dizzy for a while, he checked the battlefield imprint. As expected, it was a message from Chu Tian. This guy had sent a dozen messages asking if he was there. "I'm not," Lu Yi replied. In the Xian sect's encampment, Chu Tian was confused. He felt that Lu Yi didn't seem too happy. After a while, he replied, "Brother Yi Yi, you must be joking." He used to call him Junior Brother Yi Yi. Now that he had changed the way he addressed him, there was no doubt that some news had spread to the Xian sect. Although it was confirmed that Lu Yi was a disciple from a top sect, the fact that he could defeat someone like Luo Ji already showed his potential. What's the matter? Lu Yi tried to figure out how to blacklist this guy. After a while, he figured out that all he had to do was erase Chu Tian's brand from the imprint. Considering that this guy was his first and only friend, he would let him go for now. "It's like this," Chu Tian explained. Lu Yi learned that the Xian sect had won the previous declaration of war, so the Xian sect was preparing to hold a celebratory banquet to reward the disciples who had performed well in the declaration of war. Chu Tian wanted to invite Lu Yi to attend. In any case, Lu Yi had been of great help to the Xian sect in the early stages of the war. "I'm not free," Lu Yi immediately refused. Because of the sect master's previous instructions, he didn't want to interact with too many people, let alone attend the Xian sect's celebratory banquet. Moreover, Chu Tian probably only invited him out of courtesy. In the Xian sect's encampment, Chu Tian checked Lu Ye's simple and crude reply and realized that this brother was indeed a man of character. He replied, "Since Brother Yi Yi is not free, then I won't bother you. There are many junior brothers and sisters who wanted to thank you in person. Brother Yi Yi, when you're leaving, let me know and I'll see you off." Lu Yi ignored Chu Tian's message and took out Luo Ji's storage bag to check. As expected, the restriction lock on Luo Ji's storage bag had been opened. Lu Yi checked it and was a little surprised. He thought that there were not many good things in Luo Ji's storage bag, but he found that this guy was richer than he thought. There were indeed not many good things. The rest were elixirs, spirit stones, and a few defensive talismans, but these were what Lu Yi needed the most. There were only about 30 spirit stones. Low-level cultivators didn't consume much of these things. Luoji only carried them with him in case of emergency. There were many elixirs. There were about 10 bottles of yun spirit pills and 3 bottles of another kind of elixir. Altogether, there were nearly 100 pills. Although these things were not enough to make up for the loss of 3 days, it was better than nothing. Chapter 86. Name, Lu Yi Identity, Blue Blood Sect Disciple Cultivation, 29 Opened Apertures Location, Spirit Stream Battlefield Merit Points, 142. Lu Yi checked the information on his battlefield mark. If he remembered correctly, before coming to the Heaven-Splitting Gorge, he had 34 merit points. Now, it had become 142, an increase of 108 points. These were all obtained by Lu Yi from killing the 9 Stars sect cultivators. If he hadn't been entangled by Luoji in the last few days, he could have obtained even more. He didn't know the specific use of merit points for the time being. Although he could ask Chu Tian, doing so would easily expose some things, so Lu Yi didn't plan to ask anyone else. No matter what the use of merit points was, he would figure it out when he returned to the Blue Blood Sect station. In terms of wealth, he had 10 yuan magnetic ores, 135 spirit accumulation pills, 251 spirit stones, 31 healing pills, 22 small revitalizing pills, 9 spirit talismans, 1 small bell spirit artifact, and 4 unopened storage bags. The small revitalizing pills were found in Luoji's storage bag. The name of the pill was written on the bottle. Lu Yi had seen Luoji take them while resting from a distance, so he was sure that these spirit pills were beneficial to cultivators. The spirit talismans were all defensive and supportive. The 4 storage bags belonged to the 9 Stars sect's young master and his group, but Lu Yi guessed that besides the young master's storage bag, the other 3 probably weren't worth much. He would have to find someone to open the storage bags to find out the specifics. Although he had a lot of resources, he wasn't rich. Lu Yi was a 3rd-order spirit stream realm cultivator and needed about 15 spirit pills to open 1 aperture. Now, with the help of the gluttonous meal and spirit-gathering spirit runes, his consumption would be lower and his efficiency would be higher. What he needed to do now was to quickly recover. After waking up, his physical strength and spirit had recovered a lot, but the spirit chi he had consumed couldn't be replenished. Curious about the effect of the small revitalizing pill, Lu Yi took out one and swallowed it, transforming his secret art into a gluttonous meal. While refining the pill, he also constructed spirit-gathering spirit runes on his spirit apertures to speed up his recovery. When all of his spiritual cavities were strengthened by the small funnel-shaped spirit patterns, a formless pulling force came from his chest, gathering the surrounding spiritual energy. This was the effect of the 29 spirit patterns superimposed on each other. He had also confirmed the effects of the small revitalizing pill. This thing was much more effective than the Yun spirit pill. No wonder Luoji would take this kind of spirit pill every time he rested. He cursed in his heart. These disciples from large sects were really rich. Even the spirit pills they ate were different from others. In just a little more than a day, Lu Yi consumed 6 small revitalizing pills, and the spiritual energy in his body was replenished. Only then did he take out the jade slip given to him by the woman in the celestial sect of wonders to study. Red Lotus Soaring to the Heavens was the name of this earth-level cultivation method. If one cultivated according to this cultivation method, they would be able to open 180 apertures. What surprised Lu Yi was that this cultivation method also came with a few spells. However, these spells required a certain amount of spiritual energy to cultivate, so Lu Yi could not use them for the time being. This thing should not be cheap, but the celestial sect of wonders only sold it to him for 2 spirit stones, which was a bargain. Lu Yi now had 29 apertures, and his cultivation was at the 3rd-order spirit stream realm. If he wanted to break through to the 4th-order spirit stream realm, he would need to open at least 45 apertures. In other words, he would need to open at least 16 more apertures. In fact, This was not the case, because if one counted the parts of the cultivation method that did not overlap with the previous one, Lu Yi would need to open more than 16 spirit apertures. Comparing the differences between his open spirit apertures and those recorded in the Red Lotus Soaring to the Heavens secret art, Lu Yi came to the conclusion that he needed to open 18 more apertures before he could break through to the fourth order spirit stream realm. Only then could he completely convert the Golden Cicada free art into the Red Lotus Soaring to the Heavens secret art. Opening 18 apertures, a conservative estimate would require about 250 spirit pills. According to the number of spirit pills he had on hand, it was far from enough. Fortunately, he still had spirit stones. After thinking about it, Lu Yi sent a message. As for who to look for, there was only one person he could find now. 250 spirit stones to buy some Yun's spirit pills and food. He was not going to stay here any longer. The journey to the Blue Blood Sect station was long and time-consuming. The sooner he set off, the sooner he could arrive. The sect master should be very worried about his safety. When he set off from Blue Cloud Mountain, he had only opened 21 apertures. Now, he had opened 29. Hupa and Yi had also grown. He had spent almost 10 days in the heaven-splitting gorge, so it was time to move on. As a third-order spirit stream realm cultivator, he had enough strength to protect himself in the outer ring of the battlefield. As for cultivation, it wouldn't be a problem for him to cultivate as he hurried along, especially now that he had mastered the correct way to use the spirit-gathering spirit rune. Even if he didn't take any spirit pills, his spirit chi would still slowly increase. However, before he set off, he needed to convert the useless things in his hands into useful things. He didn't need spirit stones, so it would be best to exchange them for spirit pills. As for food, he and Hupa both had amazing appetites, so naturally, they had to stock up. Chu Tian quickly replied, "No problem." "Is Brother Yi leaving?" He had obviously realized something. Lu Yi replied. "Get ready tomorrow morning, I'll come find you." After ending his message with Chu Tian, Lu Yi continued to study the Red Lotus Soaring to the Heavens secret art, determining the next location of the spirit aperture he needed to open. Under the impact of his spirit chi, the barrier of the 30th aperture was broken. Lu Yi didn't continue to cultivate, but instead began to practice his saber. These past few days, he had been busy fighting with Luo Ji, so he had no time to do this. However, after starting his saber practice today, Lu Yi clearly felt a little different. His saber swings were more natural and smooth. He faintly felt that this was the benefit of the life and death battle these past few days. Hupa and Yi had both returned. Now that the two nearby sects had ended their declaration of war, the heaven-splitting gorge was quiet, so there was no need to worry about being ambushed. Hupa crawled on the ground, finished his jerky, and waited for Lu Yi to feed him. When he first brought Hupa out, he only needed to consume 2 spirit-accumulating pills a day, but as Big Tiger's strength increased, his consumption also increased. Now, he needed about 4 spirit-accumulating pills a day. As for Yi, she didn't consume any at all. She was Big Tiger's companion spirit, so if Big Tiger was strong, she was strong. 4 hours later, Lu Yi sheathed his saber and sat by the bonfire to eat barbecued meat. He casually tossed 2 spirit-accumulating pills to Hupa. Suddenly, he thought of something and asked, "Yi, does Hupa know any spells?" When he and Luo Ji were confronting each other in the tunnel, Yi had tried to harass them, but she was forced back by Luo Ji's golden crescent slash. At that time, Yi had cried out, and Hupa had thought she was injured, so he had roared in Luo Ji's direction. Not only had that roar disturbed Luo Ji, even Lu Yi felt like someone had used a small hammer to hammer his head. This was clearly abnormal. Chapter 87. Lu Yi still remembered the first time he met Hupa. When he met Hupa's amber eyes, he was dazed for a moment. After that, Hupa didn't show any abnormalities, until now. Yi thought for a moment and said, "I don't think so." She turned around and asked, "Hupa, do you know any spells? Hoopa responded with an, ah. He said he doesn't. Lu Ye's mouth twitched. Even now, he still couldn't figure out how Yi could communicate with Hoopa. It was amazing that she could tell what he wanted to say through his voice. It could only be said that this was Yi's unique ability as a nightmare spirit. Lu Yi didn't continue to ask. He just thought of this and asked casually. After eating and drinking to his heart's content, Lu Yi began to cultivate. Hoopa lay beside him and slept. The night passed uneventfully. At the Xian sect's encampment, Chu Tian was collecting pills and food from his fellow sect members according to Lu Ye's request. As a result, the news that tiger crossing the mountain was about to leave spread like wildfire. Before the sky was completely bright, Chu Tian began to contact Lu Yi. After confirming his location, he brought 2 of his junior brothers to meet with Lu Yi. After the exchange, Lu Yi received a large amount of food and over 200 spirit pills. At this time, the sky was already bright. Lu Yi flipped onto the tiger's back. Chu Tian cupped his fists and said, "We'll meet again. Let's keep in touch if we have time." Lu Yi nodded slightly. Hoopa's figure darted out, heading into the depths of the sky-split gorge. Looking at Lu Ye's departing figure, Chu Tian suddenly felt a little envious. Traveling and cultivating like this was truly carefree. However, Hoopa came from a large sect and had such confidence and resources. If he were to do the same, he probably wouldn't live for more than a few months. He led his 2 junior brothers back to the Xian sect's encampment. He was immediately summoned by Wang Yang and hurried over. When he arrived, he found that something was wrong. Everyone in the encampment had been summoned. Not only were the disciples of the sect included, but also the loose cultivators under the sect. Several hundred people gathered in a square. Wang Yang stood there with his hand on the hilt of his sword, as if he was waiting for something. The atmosphere was somewhat tense. Chu Tian stepped forward and cupped his fists. "Senior brother. Tiger crossing the mountain left?" Wang Yang asked. "He left," Chu Tian replied. Wang Yang nodded slightly. "It's good that he left. Enter the encampment." He seemed to be eager for Lu Yi left. "Yes." Chu Tian walked into his own group and was confused by the situation in front of him. However, Wang Yang had suddenly gathered all his people. It was clear that he wanted to make a big move. Chu Tian had a faint guess in his heart. If it was like this, then there would be a big battle today. Time flowed by slowly. After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, Wang Yang, who'd been standing there all this time, suddenly raised his brows and said in a clear voice, "My celestial sect and the 9-star sect have been neighbors for 30 years. During these 30 years, the disciples of our 2 sects have fought and killed without end, causing many casualties. The enmity between us is as deep as the ocean. Even though my celestial sect was victorious in the battle at Heaven Split Gorge a few days ago, the disciples of my celestial sect won't be able to live in peace as long as the 9-star sect remains. Thus, I intend to attack and occupy the Joshing sect's base. Junior brothers and sisters, please lend me a hand." His words caused an uproar. It had only been a day since the declaration of war, but Wang Yang was going to attack the Joshing sect's base. This shocked all the disciples of the Xian sect. The Xian sect had won the declaration of war, so it was time for them to enjoy the fruits of victory instead of causing unnecessary trouble. One had to know that attacking and occupying a base wasn't a simple matter. The base was protected by a large formation. Without breaking the formation, it was impossible to attack and occupy. However, when they recalled Wang Yang's various actions over the years, everyone knew that Wang Yang had already made arrangements for this. Chu Tian was the first to raise his arms and shout, "I am willing to follow senior brother and show the might of my celestial sect." Everyone shouted in unison, "I am willing to follow senior brother and show the might of my celestial sect." At the front of the crowd, Wang Yang smiled, "Very good." He turned to look at Chu Tian. "Send a message to Tiger crossing the mountain. Tell him that Dong Shai personally went to hunt him down an incense stick's worth of time ago. Chu Tian was shocked when he heard this. He was shocked by Dong Shai's audacity and even more shocked by Wang Yang's information network. Dong Shai was the cultivator with the highest cultivation in the 9-star sect's base. With him around, the 9-star sect's base was impregnable. However, if he left, the 9-star sect's base's defenses would immediately be reduced. From the looks of it, the death of the 9-star sect's young sect master had caused them to lose face. They could lose the war with the celestial sect, but Tiger crossing the mountain had to die. If not, Dong Shai would not have risked leaving the base to personally hunt him down. He would not leave with great fanfare, otherwise, he would be giving the celestial sect an opportunity. Even so, Wang Yang had received accurate information. It was obvious that he had already made arrangements outside the 9-star sect's base. As long as Dong Shai left the base, Wang Yang would immediately receive the news. He then recalled that at last night's celebration party, there were a few fellow disciples who did not show up. However, how did Dong Shai know that Tiger crossing the mountain had already left? Chu Tian was not stupid. He understood the whole story in an instant. The news had been leaked from the celestial sect. No wonder when he reported to senior brother Wang Yang about Tiger crossing the mountain's request last night, senior brother Wang Yang had asked him to collect from his fellow disciples. It was obviously easier to get them from within the sect. When he was collecting spiritual pills and food, many people asked him the reason. He did not hide it and told them that Lu Yi was preparing to leave. It was impossible for the disciples of the celestial sect to send a message to the 9-star sect, so the ones who leaked the news were the rogue cultivators. Just as he was thinking this, Wang Yang suddenly looked at a cultivator in the crowd and said, "Shi Jun, do you have anything to say?" The rogue cultivator called Shi Jun's forehead was covered in sweat as he nervously replied, "No, no." Wang Yang only looked at him. Shi Jun's expression became even more nervous as he blurted out, "Senior brother Wang, please spare me. It seems like you really have nothing to say." With a flick of his thumb, the sword at his waist emitted a clear sword cry. The sword turned into a sword light and instantly arrived in front of Shi Jun. It circled around Shi Jun's neck, and Shi Jun's body immediately stiffened. When the sword light returned to its scabbard, Shi Jun's head fell off. Blood gushed out from his neck like a fountain as his headless corpse fell to the ground. This unforeseen event caused all the rogue cultivators to break out in cold sweat as they looked at Wang Yang in bewilderment. Wang Yang's expression was cold as he said, "Shi Jun is a member of the celestial sect on the surface, but he is actually a spy of the 9-star sect. Today, I will kill him as a warning to others. I hope everyone will take care of themselves." Once this was said, everyone was in disbelief. However, when they thought of Shi Jun's last words, they realized that this should be the truth. Shi Jun's last words were clearly due to his guilty conscience. "Let's go and destroy the 9-star sect." Wang Yang waved his hand. A moment later, hundreds of cultivators from the celestial sect filed out of the encampment. The encampment suddenly became empty. Chapter 88. On Hu Po's back, Lu Ye's expression was leisurely. Compared to when they had just set off from Blue Cloud Mountain, he was undoubtedly much more relaxed now. Having become accustomed to this kind of bumpy journey, Hu Po's running didn't even affect his cultivation. Of course, compared to his normal state, this kind of efficiency was always slower, but fortunately, he had the spirit-gathering spirit rune to make up for it. All 30 spirit apertures were blessed with spirit-gathering spirit runes, constantly gathering the surrounding world energy. As the pill inside his abdomen was dissolved and the world energy poured into his body, the world energy in his newly opened 30th aperture was constantly increasing. He didn't use gluttonous meal, mainly because it took some time to switch secret arts, unlike when he was resting after fighting Luo Ji. At that time, both sides were in each other's field of vision, so if Luo Ji had any abnormalities, Lu Yi would have been able to immediately notice and switch secret arts. Hurrying wasn't an option as there was always some unexpected situation. Perhaps during the short 10 breaths he needed to switch secret arts, he would encounter a crisis. Maintaining the golden cicada carefree secret art at all times would also allow him to have a better ability to adapt, so sacrificing nothing more than his cultivation speed wasn't a big deal. Silently calculating the number of spirit pills he had, Lu Yi found that there was enough for him to cultivate to the 4th order spirit stream realm with some left over. Of course, this was under the assumption that there was no additional consumption. If another battle broke out, more spirit pills would be consumed. In addition, Hoopa also consumed spirit pills every day. An incense stick worth of time ago, Lu Yi had already left Heaven-Splitting Gorge. Hoopa's speed was still quite fast, so according to the 10-point map and the battlefield mark in his hand, Lu Yi pointed Hoopa in a certain direction and let him gallop. While leisurely walking, Lu Yi suddenly frowned and checked the battlefield mark. He didn't know why Chu Tian had contacted him again. However, when Lu Yi finished reading the message from Chu Tian, his face suddenly changed and he patted Hoopa's back and shouted, "Hoopa, run! Someone is chasing us!" Hearing this, Hoopa's speed suddenly increased, almost throwing Lu Yi off his back. Yi's small head popped out from Hoopa's back and she asked, "News from Profound Sect's Chu Tian? Who is it and what cultivation is it?" "A 7th order spirit stream realm cultivator named Dong Shuyi," Lu Yi replied. A few days before he killed the 9 Stars sect disciples in the Heaven-Splitting Gorge, he didn't even encounter a single 5th order spirit stream realm cultivator. He thought that this was the outer ring of the battlefield, and there wouldn't be any cultivators with high cultivation. But then, he saw the woman with the twin buns and the burly man from the 9 Stars sect. Lu Yi wasn't too sure about their cultivation, but it was definitely higher than the 5th order. At that time, he realized that it wasn't that there were no cultivators above the 5th order in the outer ring of the battlefield. The reason why he hadn't encountered any was because the two sects were suppressing each other, and a 7th order spirit stream realm cultivation was undoubtedly the stabilizing force of a sect's encampment. For such a person to personally chase after him, one could see how deep Joshing sect's hatred for him was. Lu Ye's mood was solemn. Although he was on par with Luo Ji and was confident that he could fight a 5th order spirit stream realm cultivator, if his opponent was a 7th order spirit stream realm cultivator, he wouldn't be able to resist. Yi also knew that the situation wasn't good, so she turned around and urged Hoopa to run faster. Hoopa used all his strength and ran as fast as lightning. The wind whimpered on both sides, and the scenery around them constantly receded. Another message came from the battlefield mark, and Lu Yi hurriedly checked it. "Brother Yi, try to hold on. Dong Shuyi won't stay with you for too long." "What do you mean?" Lu Yi hurriedly replied. In the Profound Sect camp, Chu Tian, who was following Wang Yang to attack the 9 Stars sect encampment, was in a dilemma. He didn't know how to explain this matter. Speaking of this matter, it was the Profound Sect that used Lu Yi. The news of Lu Yi leaving the Heaven-Splitting Gorge was leaked by them, which led to Dong Shuye's pursuit. But this kind of thing couldn't be said clearly. It would only offend Tiger Crossing Mountain. He came from a top force, and as long as he didn't die, he would definitely achieve great things in the future. Offending him at this time wasn't a good thing. Just say what you have to say. At this time, Wang Yang's words suddenly sounded in his ears. "Since you've done it, you don't have to be afraid of others finding out. If he's a smart person, he naturally knows what to do." After receiving Wang Yang's instructions, Chu Tian's heart calmed down. He replied, "My fellow disciples of the Profound Sect are currently rushing to the 9 Stars sect encampment. As long as Dong Shuyi receives the news, he will definitely rush back. So Brother Yi, you must hold on." Looking at Chu Tian's message, Lu Yi couldn't help but feel a little puzzled. Dong Shuyi, the 9 Stars sect encampment's anchor, had just come out to kill him, and the Profound Sect had actually turned out in full force to attack the 9 Stars sect encampment. The timing was a little too coincidental. It was as if the profound sect had been waiting for this opportunity, and they even invited him to participate in some kind of celebration banquet last night. Lu Yi didn't know if the profound sect had a chance to attack the 9 Stars sect encampment like this, but since they had already done it, they must have some confidence. When he was in the heaven-splitting gorge, Dong Shuyi couldn't make a move because it was too close to the profound sect encampment. It was very likely that the profound sect would interfere. So if Dong Shuyi wanted to kill him, he would have to wait until he left the heaven-splitting gorge. But only Chu Tian knew that he had left the heaven-splitting gorge, so why would Dong Shuyi chase after him? Was he being used? Lu Yi thought of a possibility. After thinking for a moment, he replied to Chu Tian, "We're even." Then, he decisively blacklisted him, even though he was sure that he was being used. Lu Yi didn't blame the heavens or anyone else. Speaking of which, he was the one who started the battle at the heaven-splitting gorge. He killed the 9 Stars sect's young master and his entourage, which led to a confrontation between the two great sects. If the profound sect hadn't interfered, Lu Yi might not have been able to stop the 9 Stars sect. At the very least, he would have had to face the pursuit of many cultivators, including many fifth-order cultivators. The intervention of the Xian sect allowed Lu Yi to avoid fighting against an entire sect with his own strength. However, when he declared war, he also saved a lot of Xian sect disciples. He didn't take any of the spoils of war and only asked for some useful spirit pills and spirit stones from the disciples he saved. The whole process could be considered as Lu Yi and the profound sect disciples helping each other. So, even if the profound sect used him in the end, Lu Yi wouldn't blame others. This was the root of the disaster he caused. In short, the Xian sect had helped him, and he had also helped a lot of Xian sect disciples. In the end, he had also obtained an earth-level cultivation method from the Xian sect, which had solved his urgent need. Now that he had been used, they did not owe each other anything. They would live well in the future. In the profound sect's camp, Chu Tian had a bitter face and sighed. What did he say? Wang Yang's voice reached his ears. Chu Tian honestly said, "We're even," and then he erased my brand. This made Chu Tian feel a little disappointed. After all, he was a disciple from a top force. How could he have the chance to come in contact with him? The corner of Wang Yang's mouth curled up. He's a smart person. Interesting. Chapter 89. Outside the heaven-splitting gorge was a vast plain with flat terrain. This kind of terrain was simply hostile to Lu Ye's current situation because there was no place to hide at all. He took out the 10,000-year map to investigate. After crossing this plain, there was a mountain, and on the other side of the mountain was a large river. After crossing the river and traveling a few dozen kilometers, there was a market. Enter the mountain. Lu Yi made a prompt decision. He didn't know what kind of methods a 7th-order spirit stream realm cultivator had, but in his current situation, entering the mountain was his only chance of survival. However, the mountain was not close to here. Even with Hu Po's speed, it would take an hour to reach it. Lu Yi secretly prayed that Dong Shuyi wouldn't run too fast. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, he suddenly felt a prickling sensation on his back. Turning his head to look back, Lu Yi was startled. This was because from the direction of the heaven-splitting gorge, a streak of light was rapidly approaching. Almost without a doubt, that streak of light was Dong Shai. Although they were separated by a great distance, Dong Shai could see Lu Yi riding on Hu Po with a single glance, his hawk-like gaze fixed on him. The prickling sensation Lu Yi felt was the other party's murderous intent. He can fly. Lu Ye's heart skipped a beat. He originally thought that by relying on Hu Po, he would have a high chance of escaping this guy's pursuit. After all, Hu Po's speed was quite fast, especially in this urgent situation where Hu Po was going all out. But he never expected that Dong Shuyi could actually fly. The situation was far from good. One was running on the ground while the other was flying in the sky. Hu Po obviously couldn't escape. But at that moment, Dong Shuye's figure suddenly fell to the ground. Before Lu Yi could figure out what was happening, this guy had already shot up into the sky and flew over. A moment later, Lu Yi saw clearly that this guy wasn't flying, but rather gliding. But every time he glided, he could cover a distance of 1,000 meters, much faster than Hu Pe. The situation wasn't as bad as Lu Yi imagined, but it was definitely not optimistic. The distance between them was constantly closing, and at this rate, Dong Shuyi would be able to catch up in less than an incense stick worth of time. A 7th-order spirit stream realm cultivator was really extraordinary. The other party running over to kill him also had a certain degree of confidence. I have to think of a way. Lu Yi pondered for a moment and took out a talisman from his storage pouch. He only had 9 talismans left in his possession. He had used too many talismans in his 3-day battle with Luo Ji. The remaining 9 talismans were all defensive and supportive in nature. The talisman that Lu Yi took out was called Wind Walker. It was an auxiliary talisman that could increase one's speed. Lu Yi had never had the chance to use it before, but now was the right time to use it. He activated his spirit energy and slapped the spirit talisman onto Hu Pe's body. In an instant, a layer of spirit light encircled Hu Pe's body and quickly gathered on its 4 legs. A light energy encircled it. With the help of the spiritual light, Hu Pe's speed suddenly increased. Although he still couldn't shake off Dong Shai's pursuit, he might be able to drag it out for a longer time. One chased while the other fled, constantly closing in on the mountain. The killing intent in Dong Shai's eyes almost condensed into substance, erupting like flames. He had originally thought that killing Hu Pe would be a piece of cake if he personally made a move. Who knew that he had underestimated the Snow White Tiger's speed? Now that he had used the help of the spirit talisman, it would be even more difficult to chase him down. However, this couldn't stop Dong Shai's determination to kill Lu Yi. The young sect leader had been killed under his watch. When this matter was reported, the elders in the sect would be furious. This was especially true for the sect leader. He had clearly declared that his incompetent son couldn't die in vain. The murderer must pay with his life. If it weren't for the fact that Cloud River tier cultivators couldn't enter the Spirit Stream battlefield, Dong Shai even suspected that the sect leader would personally charge in. Because that idiot had been killed, Dong Shai had been reprimanded. Previously, he had been defeated by the Xian sect, causing his situation in the sect to become even worse. If he could avenge the young sect leader, perhaps he could still maintain his current position. However, if he couldn't, then he would definitely be unable to move an inch in the Joshing sect in the future. Thus, no matter what, the murderer had to die. So what if his opponent had used a spirit talisman? He still couldn't shake him off. The distance between them was constantly closing. As long as he reached a suitable position, he would only need to use a spell technique to take Tiger Crossing Mountain's life. After the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn, the distance between them was only a few thousand feet. The power of the Wind Walk Spirit Talisman had been exhausted, and Lu Yi took out another one and slapped it onto Hu Pe's body. This was also the last Wind Walk Spirit Talisman. The sect leader had only prepared 2 of these for him. If he used this one, he would have none left. After the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn, the mountain ahead became clear. In just the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, Hu Pe would be able to bring Lu Yi into the mountain. At that time, it would be much easier to hide. However, Dong Shai had already chased him to within 1,000 feet. This distance was already very dangerous. Lu Yi felt his heart thumping wildly, and an indescribable sense of suffocation pressed down on him, making it difficult for him to breathe. 2,000 feet, 1,000 feet, Lu Yi felt a strong fluctuation of spiritual power behind him. When he turned around, he saw Dong Shai gliding through the air. He had one hand pointed in his direction, and a fiery red disk of spiritual power slowly rotated in front of him. Profound Sect has already sent out all their forces to attack 9-star Sect Station. You still have the mind to chase me? Lu Yi hurriedly shouted. Profound Sect was using him, so he naturally had no need to hide information for them. Now that he was in a life or death crisis, he naturally had to delay as long as he could. Dong Shai was obviously startled when he heard this. His instincts told him that Lu Yi wasn't lying. His mind was slightly disturbed, and the disk of spiritual power in his hand became somewhat unstable. He then shouted, "Deceiving others with your lies and disturbing my mind, die." With a burst of light, fist-sized fireballs rained down on Lu Yi like a meteor shower. There were at least a few dozen of them, and they seemed to be endless. Lu Ye's eyes twitched. Although he knew that a 7th-order spirit stream realm cultivator wasn't to be trifled with, he didn't expect him to be this strong. Moreover, looking at the signs of Dong Shai's attack, it was obvious that he was a Dharma cultivator. That Luo Ji was also a Dharma cultivator. I hate Dharma cultivators. Lu Yi secretly gritted his teeth and moved down from the tiger's back to sit on Hu Po's back. He pressed his hand on the hilt of his saber and waited with rapt attention. As the fireballs fell, Hu Po moved left and right to avoid them. The fireballs were extremely powerful, and they smashed holes in the ground when they landed. Flames splashed everywhere as they burned fiercely. Even if one didn't die after being hit by such a technique, they would at least lose a layer of skin. On the tiger's back, Lu Yi continuously attacked with his saber. At the same time, his defensive spirit tattoo flickered continuously. The fireballs that Hu Po couldn't avoid were cut or blocked by him. The sputtering flames burned his entire body, and Hu Po kept whimpering as the smell of barbecued meat wafted from his body. After the fireballs fell, Lu Yi and Hu Po were fine except for some burns. However, Lu Ye's saber-wielding hand was trembling violently. A 7th-order spirit stream realm technique wasn't so easy to block. The other party's technique was a large-scale attack with the intention of killing Lu Yi in one fell swoop. Its lethality was obviously spread out, but he needed to use all his strength to block each fireball. Moreover, Dong Shai was hastily casting this technique. If he used all his strength, what would happen? This time, the odds were stacked against him. Chapter 90. Not to mention Lu Ye's suffering, Dong Shai was also surprised that his spirit technique failed to kill Lu Yi. Only now did he understand that Luo Ji's words were true. This disciple from some top sect could actually fight with spirit inscriptions. He saw with his own eyes that a shield-like spirit inscription kept flashing on Lu Ye's body, blocking several fireballs. No wonder someone like Luo Ji was defeated. When Luo Ji returned yesterday, he checked the battle report and learned that this guy had lost. He thought that Luo Ji didn't try his best, but now it seemed that he was wrong. However, he wasn't Luo Ji. Luo Ji's background was better than his, and he cultivated a heaven-grade secret art, but his cultivation was still lacking. He was a dignified 7th-order cultivator, so he naturally had more means than this. His spirit chi surged, and a washbasin-sized fireball appeared in front of him. Almost as soon as it appeared, it flew towards Lu Yi at an incredible speed. Let's see how you block this. Seeing the fireball coming, Lu Ye's scalp went numb. Although there were many fireballs just now, they were only the size of a fist. He could barely block them, but how could he block this washbasin-sized fireball? Hu Po! Lu Yi roared. Hu Po's speed increased again, and he suddenly jumped out. The huge fireball fell from the sky, almost brushing past Hu Po's butt. Lu Ye's face was scalded by the scorching air, and even with his spiritual energy protecting his body, it was of no use. He could even smell the smell of his hair being burned to a crisp. He secretly rejoiced in his heart. Although this thing looked big, it was slower than the small fireballs just now. Otherwise, Hu Po wouldn't have been able to dodge it. However, in the next moment, his face changed because the huge fireball didn't fall to the ground. Instead, it suddenly changed direction and chased after them. This thing can change directions. In the air, Dong Shai, who was gliding, had one hand behind his back while the other formed a seal. He floated in the air like an immortal. However, his spirit chi surged wildly, as if he was possessed by a death god. The huge fireball was getting faster and faster. Seeing that it was about to hit him, Lu Yi knew that if he didn't have a countermeasure, he would die here with Hu Pa. Taking a deep breath, he sheathed his long saber and raised his hands in front of him. As he pushed his spirit chi, a spirit inscription immediately appeared in front of him. This was clearly not enough. The defensive spirit rune could barely block the small fireball from before, let alone such a huge fireball. However, as Lu Ye's spirit power poured in crazily, the palm-sized defensive spirit rune suddenly expanded and became the size of a table in an extremely short period of time. On top of the spirit tattoos, complicated patterns flowed and wriggled, radiating light. At this moment, Lu Yi felt that his body had been hollowed out. Although he didn't have time to take a closer look, this spirit pattern had definitely consumed at least 30% of his spirit energy. In other words, he could only activate 3 such spiritual tattoos at most before exhausting all of his spiritual power. He had never activated spiritual tattoos like this before. In the past, whether it was activating sharpness or defense, it only took an instant. However, there was a commonality between spiritual tattoos. As long as there was enough spiritual energy to maintain it, it would continue. In principle, the reason why spirit-gathering spirit tattoos could be preserved was because they were born with the effect of gathering spirit chi of heaven and earth. The gathered spirit chi could maintain its existence. The huge fireball arrived and collided with the defensive spirit tattoo. When it collided, an irresistible force was transmitted. Hu Po's body was pressed down and he almost knelt on the ground. The muscles on Lu Ye's arms bulged as if he was holding something heavy. A scorching aura rushed over. On the fireball, tongues of fire flickered, and the defensive spirit tattoo's luster quickly dimmed. Even with Lu Ye's continuous infusion of spirit chi, it could not last for more than a few breaths. However, what made Lu Yi feel slightly relieved was that he had blocked this attack. He immediately wanted to tilt the defensive spirit tattoo and push the fireball away. However, before he could do anything, Dong Shai, who was not far away, snorted coldly. Fool! He changed his hand seal. With a loud boom, flames swept out in all directions. A large part of the void became distorted, and the surrounding trees burned fiercely. Was he dead? Dong Shai's figure landed and coldly observed. Under normal circumstances, a third-order spirit stream realm cultivator would not be able to block one of his attacks, but the target he wanted to kill this time was obviously not an ordinary third-order cultivator. This guy was a disciple from a top force, and his attainments in spirit runes alone were enough to make one gasp in amazement. Rustling sounds came from the jungle and quickly disappeared. He's not dead yet. Dong Shai's eyes twitched as his murderous intent intensified. Just as he was about to continue chasing, a message suddenly came from the battlefield mark. He wanted to ignore it, but he could not help but remember what Lu Yi had said before. His heart skipped a beat and he quickly checked. It was a message from Chao Yi. It was simple and clear, but it made his heart sink to the bottom. Wang Yang has led 600 cultivators from the profound sect to attack the station. Senior brother, return quickly. If Dong Shai had not caught up with Lu Yi, he would have rushed back immediately after seeing this message. However, Lu Yi was right under his nose, so how could he be willing to give up now? Therefore, he only made a slight decision and sent a message back. At the 9 Stars sect station, the sect defending array had been fully activated, and there were cultivators stationed at every strategic location, ready for battle. The profound sect suddenly came out in full force to attack. This was something that none of the 9 Stars sect disciples had expected. After all, a battle had just been declared, and it had ended with the 9 Stars sect's defeat. Chao Yi could not figure out what Wang Yang was trying to do. However, it had already happened. As the cultivator with the highest cultivation in the station, Chao Yi was duty-bound to command the cultivators in the station to participate in the defense. However, he could not do it alone, so he immediately sent a message to Dong Shai. However, Dong Shai's reply made him feel helpless. It was only 3 simple words, hold on. At this moment, what else could he do but hold on? The sect defending array was fully activated, and a large number of spirit stones were burning, turning into defensive power that blocked the profound sect cultivators outside the station. Conservatively speaking, it would not be a problem to resist the attacks from the profound sect for a day or two. Therefore, although the 9 Stars sect was besieged, the cultivators in the station did not panic, other than being a little nervous. King Wang Yang. Chao Yi cursed in his heart. He really did not know what was wrong with this guy. Just then, a disciple suddenly ran over in a panic and reported something. Chao Yi was shocked and hurried out of the main hall. He immediately saw a silhouette holding the hand of a woman in purple. They were hurrying towards him. Luo Ji! Chao Yi shouted. He jumped up and landed in front of the silhouette. He looked at him and then at the woman in purple behind him. What are you doing? Luo Ji frowned and said, I'm leaving. Leaving? Chao Yi did not understand. Where are you going at this time? Of course I'm leaving this place. Do you want me to wait for death? Luo Ji looked at him like he was an idiot. Chao Yi frowned, not understanding what Luo Ji meant. He stopped him and said, you can leave if you want, but why are you taking Zi with you? Luo Ji said, from now on, Zi is no longer a disciple of the 9 Stars sect. Chapter 91. Chao Yi was really angry. If Zi isn't a disciple of 9 Stars sect, could she be from your boundless island? His sect had been attacked by the profound sect and Chao Yi was already badly battered, but Luo Ji suddenly making such a fuss really angered him. If it weren't for Luo Ji's extraordinary background, Chao Yi would have already taught him a lesson. Luo Ji said lightly, yes, Zi has already agreed to follow me and has nothing to do with 9 Stars sect. Ridiculous. Chao Yi laughed in anger as he stared coldly at the woman in purple behind Luo Ji. The woman's face was expressionless as she stared up at the sky, as if this matter had nothing to do with her. She wasn't ignoring Chao Yi, nor was she trying to get rid of him, she was simply born this way. Although Chao Yi and this woman in purple were from the same sect and had known each other for several years, they had never spoken more than 3 sentences to each other. Because no matter what, she was always like this, ignoring everything he asked her. Chao Yi had always felt that his junior sister was a very strange person. She wasn't indifferent, but rather indifferent to everything in the world, as if nothing could arouse her interest. So when Luo Ji said that she had agreed to something, Chao Yi would never believe it. How could such a woman casually agree to something? Withdrawing his gaze, Chao Yi said coldly, Luo Ji, I've tolerated you because you are a disciple of Boundless Island, but don't make trouble again. Luo Ji sighed and said, why can't we talk it through? He suddenly took a step forward until he was almost face to face with Chao Yi. He looked directly into Chao Ye's eyes. I am going to take Zi away now. Do you dare to object? Chao Yi was furious, wondering if this guy was trying to bully others. Although Luo Ji was only a second-order cultivator, behind him was Boundless Island. If he wanted to take Zi away by force, Chao Yi really couldn't stop him. He couldn't just beat Luo Ji up, right? If he did, Boundless Island would definitely not let this matter go. Chao Yi could take Zi away, but Luo Ji would definitely not sit back and do nothing. If things got out of hand, both of them would lose face. Thinking so, Chao Yi said, you can leave, but Zi can't. If you insist on doing so, then you can only take away a cripple. As he spoke, Chao Yi raised his right hand and a red battlefield seal appeared. He looked at Luo Ji and said, don't forget, I am the deputy guardian of the sect. If Zi dares to betray the sect, I can ask the heavens to destroy her cultivation. Luo Ji was indifferent. You can try. Don't force me. Chao Yi gritted his teeth. Scram! Luo Ji pushed Chao Ye's shoulder, trying to push him away, but he was just a second-order law cultivator. How could he shake Chao Yi, a 6th-order body cultivator? This push was very solid, but the other party's figure did not move at all. Luo Ji did not linger. He led Ziyi around Chao Yi and headed for the main hall. "Zi, it's not too late to turn back." Chao Yi turned around and looked at his junior sister who was following behind Luo Ji, preparing to give her one last chance. The other party was still looking up at the sky, turning a deaf ear to his words, but Chao Yi knew that she had heard him. Chao Yi sighed and shouted, "9 stars sex Lan Zi has disregarded the sex rules and is greedy for vanity, intending to betray the sect. Disciple Chao Yi respectfully requests the heavens to destroy her cultivation." Finished speaking, he looked at his junior sister who was walking forward with a pained expression. Although this junior sister was a bit cold, she was still from the same sect as him. If it were not for the current situation, he would not have taken such drastic measures. However, at this moment, the profound sect was attacking the sect station, so he did not have time to worry about this. What's more, he wanted to let everyone know the consequences of betraying the sect at this time. Luo Ji pulled Lan Zi forward and soon entered the main hall. Chao Ye's face changed as he suddenly realized something. The seal has changed. Logically speaking, it was a fact that Lan Zi had betrayed the sect. If he, as the vice-guardian of the encampment, respectfully invited Tianji, he would definitely be able to cripple her cultivation. However, Tianji actually had no reaction at all. This was practically impossible. Unless Lan Zi was no longer a 9 stars sect disciple and was no longer under the sect's control. Only by changing the battlefield seal could she be rid of her identity as a 9 stars sect disciple. However, changing the battlefield seal required a huge amount of merit points. It was not something an ordinary spirit stream stage cultivator could afford. In a flash, Chao Yi figured out many things. He was wondering why Luo Ji would suddenly come to the 9 stars sect's territory to train. Coming from a top force like Boundless Island, he would be welcomed anywhere. It turned out that this guy had come prepared. From the beginning to the end, his target had been Lan Zi. But why would he pay such a high price for Lan Zi? Previously, Chao Yi thought that Luo Ji was lusting after Lan Zi's beauty. But now, it seemed that this was not the case. How could someone like Luo Ji be tempted by beauty? Wait! Chao Yi shouted angrily. He rushed into the main hall and saw Luo Ji with Lan Zi. They each placed their hands on the Heaven's Fate pillars. The Heaven's Fate pillars were already shining brightly, gradually enveloping their bodies. "You can't leave like this." Chao Yi raised his hand to stop them. Luo Ji pointed at him with his chin. "I advise you to leave this place quickly. Otherwise, you will be in big trouble." "What?" Chao Yi was shocked. Boom, the ground shook, and Chao Yi could not stand firmly. He turned his head and saw a graceful figure floating in the air outside the sect's protective spell. It was the B*TCH from the Celestial Sect. At this moment, the 9 colorful spirit energy dragons before the bitch were entangled with one another. Their bodies spun and turned into a violent attack. It was like a drill that was smashing into the 9 stars sect protection formation. What is this? Even with Chao Ye's vast knowledge and experience, he couldn't recognize what kind of spell technique this was. However, what he could be sure of was that with the cultivation level of that B*TCH, there was no way that she could unleash such a spell technique. The might of her attack was already on par with that of a Cloud River tier cultivator. This was the power of a spiritual talisman. A spiritual talisman that flowed out from the core circle. To obtain such a spiritual talisman, it must have cost a lot of merit points. Where did she get it? Was it Wang Yang? But Wang Yang had never been to the core circle. How could he have obtained such a spiritual talisman? Chao Yi did not have time to think about it anymore. Under the constant impact of the 9 dragons, the 9 stars sect's protective spell was on the verge of collapse. It would not be long before it was broken. When that time came, the entire 9 stars sect's encampment would be in danger. Chao Yi smiled bitterly and staggered. No wonder Luo Ji ran so fast. He obviously saw the signs of the other party activating the spiritual talisman. This level of spiritual talisman was activated by a 6th order cultivator and required a long time to prepare. Luo Ji came from Boundless Island and was more knowledgeable than Chao Yi. Naturally, he recognized the spiritual talisman. Chapter 92. 9 Stars sect had been defeated, thoroughly defeated. The only one who could fight against Wang Yang was Dong Shai, but he had gone out to chase after Tiger Crossing. Once the sect's spirit array was broken, no one could stop Wang Yang's slaughter. Chao Yi faintly sensed that there was a conspiracy behind this, but there was no way for him to think too much about it. Pushing his spirit chi, he shouted, "Everyone, prepare to evacuate." The disciples who were stationed at various strategic locations to assist in the defense were already in a state of panic. Upon hearing Chao Ye's shout, they immediately rushed in the direction of the main hall. This was where the Zhoxing sect's Tianji pillar was located. With the help of the Tianji pillar, they could return to the Zhouzhou continent. Crack! The sound of the defensive formation shattering could be heard, and a large patch of fluorescent light dispersed from the outskirts of the Zhoxing sect's encampment like fireflies filling the sky. Xiao Zhu's body that was suspended in the air fell weakly to the ground. Wang Yang was already prepared, and he scooped her up and held her in his arms. With his other hand, he pulled out the long sword at his waist and pointed it forward, "Kill." In the jungle, Lu Yi was fleeing in a sorry state, his arms bloody and even his chest charred. Dong Shai's 7th order cultivation was not something he could fight against. If not for his spirit rune, he would have died when the other party used his first spirit technique. Lu Yi originally thought that escaping into the mountains would increase his chances of survival, but in fact, the dense forest could not hide his figure. Dong Shai chased after him like a maggot in a tarsal bone. Casting one spell after another, the trees that were as thick as several people hugging their arms around fell one after another. He had separated from Hupa, and when he was hit by Dong Shai's second attack, he was knocked off the tiger's back by the powerful impact, which was why his chest was charred. Lu Yi did not know how serious Hupo's injuries were, but they were definitely not light, because when Hupa fell, the ground under him was quickly dyed red with blood. Lu Yi didn't even have the time to check on Hupo's injuries. He felt that he wouldn't be able to escape this time, so he made a prompt decision to split up with Hupa. If they continued to stay together, even Hupo would die. If he was destined to die, Hupo would at least be able to survive. Fortunately, Dong Shai did not continue to glide in the sky, because the trees here were very tall and the canopy was extremely dense. If he flew into the sky, it would be very easy for him to lose sight of Lu Yi. Even so, with his 7th order cultivation, his speed was not something Lu Yi could escape from. With only 30% of his spiritual power left, he could only activate the defensive spiritual rune, which could barely block Dong Shai's attack, once more. There was no chance. Lu Yi raised his bloody right hand and grasped the long knife at his waist. Although this life was a little short and not exciting enough, even if he died, he still had to face the enemy. Lu Yi didn't pay much attention to it at first, but after figuring out the source of the sound, he immediately turned around and rushed in that direction. Dong Shai, who was chasing from behind, saw Lu Ye's figure from afar, and his eyes spewed flames of anger. He really didn't expect that he would not be able to capture a 3rd-order brat after spending so much time chasing after him. This was a little difficult for him to accept and only served to further strengthen his determination to kill Lu Yi. Seeing Lu Yi change direction and hearing the rumbling sound, how could Dong Shai not know what Lu Yi was up to? "Boy, you can't run away. Obediently accept your death and you'll be spared from physical pain." Dong Shai shouted angrily as he pushed his spiritual energy and soared into the sky. Up in the air, Lu Yi caught sight of an enormous waterfall. Beneath the blazing sun, the splashes of water formed a rainbow-colored light. Within the rainbow-colored light, Lu Yi leaped into the air, heading down the waterfall. "Where do you think you're going?" Dong Shai shouted, hurriedly sending out a golden arc slash towards Lu Yi. The golden arc slash displayed by a 7th-order cultivator was much more powerful than the one displayed by Luo Ji, a 2nd-order cultivator. The golden arc slash was almost a meter long. The crescent-shaped slash broke through the air, but because both sides were moving quickly, the slash missed its target and cut through Lu Ye's back. Lu Ye's body-protecting spirit chi was like paper as blood splattered everywhere, causing his face to twitch in pain. At that moment, he didn't even have time to urge his defensive spirit rune. If he had been hit by the golden arc slash, his torso would have been cut in half. His body fell rapidly downwards and a moment later, crashed into the pool below. Lu Yi immediately dove down, trying to conceal himself. At the same time, Dong Shai's figure floated down from above the waterfall and hovered above the pool, sending out a golden arc slash towards the spot where Lu Yi had fallen. Compared to other spirit arts, the penetrative power of the golden arc slash was undoubtedly stronger. Although it could be blocked by the current, there was no better way at this time unless Dong Shai was willing to dive into the water to search for traces of Lu Yi. As the golden arc slash descended, the water surface was cut open and thick blood poured out of the water along with some pieces of internal organs. Seeing this scene, Dong Shai hurriedly checked his battlefield mark. 10 merit points had been deducted. This made Dong Shai's heart ache. The spirit stream battlefield was a very strange place. There seemed to be a mysterious force that controlled the merit points of cultivators. If one killed an enemy above their realm, the merit points would be doubled, but if one killed an enemy 3 minor realms lower in cultivation, a large amount of merit points would be deducted. This mysterious force seemed to encourage cultivators to fight above their realm, and it would also punish those who bullied the weak. This was also the reason why there were not many strong cultivators in the outer circle of the battlefield. Contribution points were very useful to any cultivator. In order to obtain contribution points, one must first kill an enemy with a cultivation base that was not too far off from the cultivators. There weren't many places where 6th or 7th order cultivators could benefit from in the outer ring. Although they wouldn't completely leave the outer ring, they would still choose to stay relatively close to the inner ring to gain experience. Dong Shai was a 7th order cultivator, so killing a 4th order cultivator would give him merit points, but if he killed a 3rd order cultivator, 10 merit points would be deducted, and if he killed a 2nd order cultivator, 20 merit points would be deducted. 10 merit points wasn't much, but it wasn't little either. For Dong Shai, killing a cultivator of the same realm only gave him 7 merit points. If it weren't for the orders from the sect's elders, he wouldn't have personally chased after Lu Yi. Fortunately, everything was over. He looked at his battlefield mark again. When he checked his merit points just now, he found that someone had sent him a message. When he saw the content of the message, his face changed drastically. Chapter 93. Dong Shai originally wanted to search for Lu Ye's corpse, but the information in the battlefield mark had thrown his mind into chaos. How could he care about Lu Yi? Chao Yi sent another message. It was just 3 simple words. Danger, return quickly. He had received Chao Ye's message before and knew that Xian sect cultivators had come to attack Zhoxing sect station, but he did not panic because attacking a sect station was not a simple matter. According to his estimation, even if Xian sect sent out all their forces, the great array of their station could last for a day or two, which was enough time for him to kill Lu Yi and rush back. But Chao Yi actually sent such a message in such a short time, which showed that the situation in the station was extremely bad. He hurried back and at the same time sent a message to Chao Yi to ask about the situation, but there was no reply at all. Below the pool, Lu Yi was in a daze, his spirit chi almost dried up, and there was a large amount of blood around him, as well as some broken limbs and pieces of flesh. After entering the water, he found that there was someone under the water, and from the looks of it, that person seemed to be collecting something under the water. When they saw each other, they were both startled. Lu Yi did not have the time to explain anything to this person. After stabilizing himself at the bottom of the water, he immediately activated the defensive spirit rune above his head. Then, a golden arc broke through the water and attacked. The strange cultivator didn't even make a sound before he was cut into pieces. It could be said that he had suffered an unexpected disaster. The defensive spirit pattern above Lu Ye's head also shattered after blocking a slash. Fortunately, the remaining golden arcs didn't hit him. The attack soon stopped, but he did not dare to poke his head out because he could not determine Dong Shai's movements. Enduring the exhaustion and pain all over his body, he dived underwater for dozens of breaths until he could no longer hold his breath. Only then did he emerge from the water in a sorry state. He only took a deep breath and quickly dived again, continuing to move forward under the water with great difficulty. After doing this several times, Lu Yu was exhausted, but to his relief, Dong Shai did not seem to attack him again. A quarter of an hour later, when Lu Yi emerged from the water again, a strong force suddenly came from behind him. He had been hit by something. His back was already injured, and his condition was extremely bad, so this hit almost made him faint. Lu Yi instinctively thought that Dong Shai had come to kill him again. He drew the long saber from his waist and slashed back. There was no one there, only a piece of dead wood that had been cut into two by him. It was this piece of dead wood that had collided with him. He looked around and could no longer see Dong Shai's figure. Lu Yi held the saber in his hand in a daze. Where is this guy? A dignified 7th order cultivator had chased after him and forced him into a dead end. There was no reason for him to just give up like this, but after searching for a long time, he still didn't see Dong Shai. He was sure that this guy had really left. He quickly realized something. Previously, a cultivator had been killed by Dong Shai at the bottom of the pool. Did that guy think that he had already succeeded? The more he thought about it, the more he felt that this possibility was not small. Furthermore, the Celestial Sect of Wonders was already attacking the Joshing sect's base. Dong Shai probably did not have the mood to carefully investigate the situation underwater. After confirming that he had killed one person, he hurriedly left. Was that why he was able to escape? After sorting out his thoughts, Lu Yu relaxed. Endless exhaustion and pain swept over him, and his body couldn't help but sink into the water. He hurriedly raised his hand and grabbed the piece of dead wood, struggling to float up. His consciousness was hazy, and he could faint at any time. However, Lu Yi knew that if he fainted at this time, it would be very difficult for him to wake up. He was seriously injured this time. His right hand trembled as he took out a jade bottle from the storage pouch at his waist. He opened the bottle and poured all of the healing pills into his mouth, chewing and swallowing them down without caring how many healing pills were in the bottle. He wanted to switch his secret art to the gluttonous feast to speed up the absorption of pill energy, but the spirit chi in his body was almost exhausted. His spirit acupoints had dried up, and his golden cicada carefree secret art had stopped circulating. How could he spare any energy to switch secret arts? He could only use all his strength to tie a knot on the dead wood. Don't drown to death. That would be a joke. As this last thought emerged, Lu Ye's vision was shrouded in darkness, and he completely lost consciousness. When he opened his eyes again, Lu Yi found himself lying face down on a bed. After a short moment of absent-mindedness, an indescribable pain swept over him. What surprised him was that there was a person sitting next to him. A faint fragrance lingered on the tip of his nose, and from the corner of his eyes, he could see that the person sitting next to him was a woman. Not only did he feel pain on his back, but he also felt a burst of numbness. In addition, there was a slight fluctuation of spirit chi and a constantly flickering dark green radiance. Was I saved by someone? He remembered that before he lost consciousness, he used his clothes to tie the dead wood. After that, he should have drifted with the flow, but now he appeared in such a place. It was obvious that someone had saved him. He didn't make any sound, because he didn't know who had saved him. He only quietly sensed his own condition. It was very bad. His spirit chi hadn't recovered, and his injuries were serious. Not only was there a deep cut on his back, but his chest and hands were also burned. This kind of injury would be fatal to an ordinary person, but he was a cultivator now, so he could still hold on for a while. Moreover, he had taken a bottle of healing pills before he fainted, so the healing pills must have played a role. But the situation still wasn't optimistic. Your breathing has changed. A pleasant voice suddenly entered his ears. It was very gentle. It's normal to be vigilant towards strangers. But if I wanted to kill you, you would have died long ago. Lu Yi couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. For a moment, he was speechless, not knowing what to say. A small white hand suddenly stretched out in front of him. The woman said, although I saved you, I still want to confirm which side you belong to. As she spoke, a light blue radiance appeared on the back of the small hand. She was actively revealing which side she belonged to. This made Lu Ye's heart relax. He slightly circulated the remaining spirit qi in his body, and a light blue radiance appeared on the back of his hand. Then I didn't save the wrong person, the woman said in a gentle voice. But Lu Yi was sure that if he hadn't revealed the glow of his battlefield imprint, or if the light he revealed was red, the woman would have killed him. In the spirit stream battlefield, the difference in sides was a reason to kill. There was no room for sympathy or mercy. The itchiness on his back became more obvious, and the dark green radiance flickered more frequently. After a while, the spirit qi fluctuations on his back stopped. Then, the woman smeared something on his wound, causing Lu Yi to sweat profusely from the pain. After smearing it, she stuck something on Lu Ye's back. Lu Yi couldn't see it, but he guessed it was something like a plaster. After doing this, the woman stood up and said, "You're seriously injured. Don't move around for now. It'll affect your recovery." "Thank you." The woman said, "Ling Yu found you and brought you back." Then, she walked away. It was only now that Lu Yi saw the woman's side profile. He didn't know if it was because he had received a favor from someone, but he felt that this woman was as beautiful as a fairy. Her chest was full, and her hands were placed in front of her stomach. Her steps were dignified. Chapter 94. Lu Yi didn't wake up for long before he fell back into a deep sleep. When he woke up again, he found that there was a chair in front of him, and a young girl was sitting on it. The girl's head was drooping, as if she was too sleepy and dozing off. The room was filled with the strong smell of blood, as well as some indescribable herbal smell. Although he had crawled for a long time, Lu Yi didn't feel suffocated. Even the burns on his chest didn't hurt too much, which made him feel strange. After careful examination, he found that the bedboard on his chest had been artificially hollowed out. The person who placed him here was obviously a very careful person who took care of his injuries. He moved his body with difficulty, trying to get up, but he didn't have much strength at the moment. After struggling a few times, not only was he unable to get up, but he was also in so much pain that his forehead was sweating. The little movement woke the dozing girl up. She opened her eyes and stood up with a squeak. "You're awake." She walked to the bed and helped Lu Yi up. Although the girl was petite, she was still a cultivator, so she still had the strength to help him up. However, because Lu Ye's chest and back were injured, he could only sit upright on the bed. The girl brought out a bowl of dark green medicine from the side. "Big Sister Hua Xi said that you should drink this bowl of medicine when you wake up. It will heal your injuries." Lu Yi didn't know who this Big Sister Hua Xi was, but he secretly guessed that it might be the plump woman he saw before. He reached out to take the medicine and said, "Thank you." He raised the bowl to his mouth, and a pungent smell immediately rushed up to his nose. Lu Yi frowned. This thing was so strong. However, good medicine was always bitter, so he took a big gulp. He wasn't worried that others would harm him. If they really wanted to harm him, they would have done it long ago. There was no need to go through all this trouble. The next moment, his face became full of expressions. Not only was this thing addictive, it was also deadly. Lu Yi considered himself to be someone with some tolerance, but this mouthful almost made him faint again. It was really too bitter, and Lu Yi wondered if he had drunk the bile of some unknown creature. The girl seemed to have expected this. She looked at him with bright eyes and said anxiously, Sister Hua Xi said that you have to drink it clean. If you don't drink it clean, she will be angry. An angry Sister Hua Xi is so scary. There was no need for her to say anything. Lu Yi only paused for a moment before she drank the entire bowl of medicinal concoction. The girl took the bowl, took out a grayish-brown object from her inventory bag, and gave it to Lu Yi. Put it on your mouth. Lu Yi took it curiously and tossed it into her mouth. She raised her eyebrows. This thing tasted like malt candy. Only then did he have the time to look around. He was in a building that looked like a bamboo building. It was not very big, and the layout of the house was very simple. He did not know where he was. While he was observing his surroundings, the young girl was packing up her things as she said, My name is Ling Yu. How should I address you, senior brother? One leaf. Lu Yi replied casually. Suddenly, she came back to her senses and vaguely felt that she had heard this name somewhere before. After thinking for a moment, she suddenly asked, Was it you who saved me? That woman told him before that it was Ling Yu who saved him. If he was not mistaken, it should be this young girl in front of him. I only brought you back. It was Sister Hua Xi who saved you. Ling Yu smiled. You floated over from the river. I thought you were dead. I wanted to search your corpse, but I found you were still alive, so I brought you back. Her words were interesting. Lu Yi could not help but twitch the corner of his mouth. No matter what, thank you. It's nothing. We were all saved by Sister Hua Xi. Ling Yu smiled at Lu Yi. The little girl's face had some baby fat, and her skin was white and tender. When she smiled, there was a dimple on her left cheek. She looked very cute. She had already packed up her things. Have a good rest. Sister Hua Xi has something to do. She will come back at night to check on your injuries. If you need anything, just shout. I live next door. Lu Yi nodded lightly. Ling Yu pushed the door open and left. She closed the door before she left. I met some kind people. Lu Yi was secretly glad that he was lucky. However, in the end, it was because they all belonged to the Haotian Alliance. If he met a group of people from the Myriad Demon's Ridge, he was afraid that they would really search his corpse. He silently remembered this kindness. His spirit tool long saber was still there. It was brought back together and placed beside the bed. There were also a few storage pouches placed neatly at the head of the bed. Although they met by chance, the other party's character was really good to be able to do this. Although he was lucky to survive, he was afraid that he would need some time to recuperate from his injuries. He was really beaten up miserably by Dong Shai. The most important thing now was to recover some spiritual power. No matter what, a cultivator with spiritual power would have the power to protect himself. He raised his hand with difficulty and took out his storage pouch. He took out a bottle of Yun spirit pills and consumed one, silently refining it. After refining 2 Yun spirit pills, he finally got the gluttonous meal to work again. This way, the efficiency of his recovery would be greatly increased. He took out another healing pill and swallowed it. Then, he began to construct the spirit gathering pattern in his spiritual cavities. After busying himself, he was covered in sweat. The sky outside was getting dark. Lu Yi, who was recovering, heard the sound of the door being pushed open next door. Then, he heard Ling Yu's clear voice. Sister Hua Xi, you're back. The gentle voice that he had heard before sounded. Then, the 2 women whispered something to each other for a while. Outside the bamboo house, the woman called Hua Xi talked with Ling Yu for a while. Then, she raised her head and looked at Lu Ye's room. She faintly felt that with Lu Ye's room as the center, the world's spiritual energy from all directions was gathering there. Although it wasn't obvious, she could still see it if she looked carefully. She was slightly surprised. The talent of this young man picked up by Ling Yu seemed to be quite high. However, she didn't know that Lu Yi could gather the world's spiritual energy like this mainly because of the spirit gathering pattern. As for his true talent, it was just a sad story. Go and rest. Hua Xi patted Ling Yu's little head. Ling Yu smiled and said, do you need my help? No need. Then I'll go and rest. After the two women said goodbye, Hua Xi walked toward Lu Ye's bamboo house. She came to the door and gently knocked before pushing the door open and entering. Lu Yi had stopped cultivating and even dispersed the spirit gathering pattern. He had noticed a problem before. Once he activated the spirit gathering pattern, the world's spiritual energy would show signs of gathering. It wasn't a big deal if such signs appeared during cultivation, but if others saw it when he wasn't cultivating, it would be hard to explain. Looking at the woman who pushed the door open and entered, Lu Ye's eyes lit up. Yesterday, he could only vaguely see the side of her face. Today, he could finally see her face. It was a beauty. She was wearing a tight white dress with blue patterns that accentuated her voluptuous figure, accentuating her exquisite curves. Chapter 95. How do you feel? Hua Xi walked to Lu Ye's bedside and stood still. Her body fragrance made one feel relaxed and happy. Lu Yi replied, much better. Let me take a look. Hua Xi's plump buttocks were crooked. She sat beside Lu Ye's bed and lifted his sleeve to check the injury on his arm. Then, she raised her hand to lift his lapel and looked at his chest. She nodded and said, it's fine. As she spoke, she took out some things from her storage bag and placed them beside the bed. She then instructed Lu Yi, take off your shirt. Lu Ye's shirt had long been tattered and covered in blood. He had been busy recovering before and didn't have time to change it. Now, he obediently took off his shirt. Hua Xi fiddled with the things she took out and said, your arms and chest are badly burned. It's not convenient to bandage them. For the time being, use medicine for a few days. Okay. Lu Yi responded. Give me your hands. Hua Xi said. Lu Yi stretched out his hands, revealing his arms covered in dark green medicine. This should have been applied yesterday when he was still unconscious. Hua Xi used some unknown method to clean Lu Ye's arm before continuing to apply the emerald green medicine on it. After applying the medicine to his arms, she moved on to his chest. The injury on his back was a cut, so it wasn't treated this way. Lu Yi remembered that Hua Xi had applied some kind of ointment on his back yesterday. Today, he felt unbearably itchy all day. When she was treating the wound on his back, Hua Xi asked Lu Yi to turn around and said, bear with it. Before Lu Yi had time to react, he heard a tearing sound on his back. It seemed that the plaster he had applied yesterday had been torn off. Intense pain came from the wound, causing him to tremble all over and break out in a cold sweat. This woman called Hua Xi was truly a woman who spoke the softest of words and used the most ruthless of methods. The dark green light began to flicker, and there was a fluctuation of spiritual power. Lu Yi turned his head in surprise and vaguely caught a glimpse of something. He suddenly realized. Senior Marshall's sister is a medical cultivator. Dai Hai from the Vitality sect had told him before that the cultivators were divided into 6 categories. They were the body cultivators who focused on cultivating the fleshly body, the weapon cultivators who focused on close combat, the Dharma cultivators who studied spells, the medical cultivators who practiced medicine and helped the world, the ghost cultivators who communicated with the netherworld, and the external cultivators who were proficient in alchemy, drawing talismans, setting up formations, crafting tools, and all sorts of other things. Because a cultivator's cultivation base was very low at the beginning of their cultivation, they were mostly weapon cultivators. When one's cultivation base was not high enough, having a weapon in hand would undoubtedly give them a greater ability to protect themselves, and it would also make it easier for them to move around the spirit stream battlefield. However, during this period, the cultivators would make some preparations according to their own habits and preferences. When their cultivation was high enough, they could determine their own faction. The cultivators he had seen in the heaven-splitting gorge before were basically all armament cultivators. Only Luo Ji had laid the foundation of a Dharma cultivator with his second-order cultivation. This was also because he came from a top sect, so he had the foundation and capital to do so. That Dong Shuyi was also a Dao cultivator, but he was a seventh-order spirit stream realm cultivator. Until now, Lu Yi had met another cultivator who had determined their own faction, and it was also a medical cultivator. No wonder she was able to treat him. Hua Xiai responded casually, "Why? Do you have a grudge with a medical cultivator?" Lu Yi hurriedly said, "No, I have a grudge with a Dharma cultivator." He secretly swore in his heart that in the future, if he encountered a Dharma cultivator who was not pleasing to the eye, he would kill them first. Hua Xiai pursed her lips and smiled, "I see." The injuries on Lu Ye's body were obviously caused by a powerful spirit technique. As a medical cultivator who treated and saved people, Hua Xiai still had a discerning eye. Under the constant urging of Hua Xi's spirit qi, Lu Yi clearly felt the pain on his back diminish, and finally, it became itchy. After she stopped, she stuck a plaster on Lu Ye's back. Next, she began to treat the wounds on Lu Ye's chest and arms. This time, Lu Yi could clearly see that Hua Xi's hands were floating above his wounds. Her palms were covered in a dark green light, and under the nourishment of Hua Xi's wood-type spiritual energy, his wounds were slowly recovering. This kind of healing method was quite magical. This senior martial sister was bubbling with beauty, a good figure, and pleasant to the ears. This kind of healing was naturally not boring. After a while, Hua Xiai stopped and stood up, saying, "All right, today's healing is done." She extended a hand in front of Lu Yi, 10 spirit stones. Lu Yi looked up at her with a puzzled expression, "En?" Hua Xiai smiled, "Each healing session costs 5 spirit stones. You were too tired yesterday, so I didn't tell you. Including today's session, it's a total of 10 spirit stones. There's a fee." Lu Yi was stunned. Hua Xiai said, "The herbs I gave you to drink have to be bought, and the spirit pills and spirit stones I used to recover my spirit qi, so, of course there's a fee." Lu Yi was speechless. "You're a disciple from a large sect. You won't go back on your word, right?" Hua Xi's hand was still stretched out in front of Lu Yi, firm and persistent. "Of course not." Lu Yi didn't know how she could tell that he was a disciple from a large sect, but what she said was not without reason. They were neither relatives nor friends, and since she was willing to spend time and effort to heal him, he should do something in return. Being able to meet a medical cultivator here would undoubtedly save him a lot of time to recover, so it was still a profit for him. "I don't have any spirit stones, but are spirit pills okay?" Lu Yi asked. "Of course." Hua Xiai nodded. Lu Yi took out a bottle of 10 spirit pills and handed it to Hua Xiai. "Thank you for your patronage." Hua Xiai accepted the spirit pills and smiled even more happily. Lu Yi was afraid that she would say he was welcome to come again. "Then you should rest well." Hua Xiai reminded him, "I'll come back tomorrow to heal you." Before she pushed the door open and left, she turned back and said, "If you can supplement it with healing pills, you should be able to recover faster." "Got it." Lu Yi nodded. Over the next few days, Lu Yi was bedridden. During the day, the little girl called Ling Yu would come to give him that bitter and deadly medicine, and at night, Hua Xiai would cast a spell to heal Lu Yi. Ling Yu's full name was Ruan Ling Yu, and she was a lively little girl. She was also a little sociable. After chatting with her a few times, Lu Yi learned that this was the site of a sect. No one knew what sect this place originally belonged to. It had been attacked decades ago, and the entire sect had been destroyed. Although the Tianji pillar still remained, the Tianji pillar was no longer able to perform its original function. This made Lu Yi involuntarily recall the scene where the sect leader had sent him to the spirit stream battlefield in the wilderness. That place seemed to be the site of a sect as well. Regardless of whether it was in the 9 states or the Spirit Stream battlefield, there were many such sites. When a new sect appeared, they could choose these sites as their base because of the Tianji pillar that had been left behind. However, there were also many sites that no one chose, and these sites became places where rogue cultivators gathered. Although the buildings in these sites had been in disrepair for many years, there were still many places that provided shelter from the wind and rain. Moreover, the locations were quite good, so it was natural that some homeless rogue cultivators would come. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.